Bismillah wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. You've all been waiting for this. Finally, direct engagement with YT93. Yalla. Bismillah. If you guys haven't, please watch the introduction before indulging into this one. I made a separate independent video introducing many of the themes that I'm going to make use of today here. So anyways, without any further ado, let's start bi'awnihi ta'ala. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي قل جاء الحق وزهق الباطل إن الباطل كان زهوقا. Right, so this is YT93, and the part 1 that we're looking at is the part concerned with Lisaan. So the structure of these videos is going to be something as follows. First of all, I'm going to obviously look into the video YT93 itself by Dr. Hany Atchan. And it has 4 major parts. So it has its first part, which is about Lisaan, the second part about Millat, third part about Shu'aib alayhi salam, and the fourth part is conclusion. Then, if time permits, and if I'm able to, I'm going to directly engage with some of his videos, other videos which contain examples to these concepts already listed here. Especially his video series on Yusuf alayhi salam, maybe if time permits. So YT93, the video is titled Quraysh versus the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And its part 1 is about Lisaan. And his claim is that the Quraysh, Arab, did not understand the Quran, right? That's his claim. Because it is in a specialized stylistic slang, what he calls a locution. And inshallah, we're going to deal with this in detail today, inshallah. That could not be fully understood by them, right? So it's in a specialized way of speaking, call it slang, call it parole, call it locution, but I'm going to come down to parole in a minute. It is a specialized mode of speaking, and so they couldn't understand it. It is understood only through the methods that we apply. We, the channel, Marvelous Quran. So, Dr. Hany makes this claim. We all know about this claim, right? This is nothing new. This is his claim. And he reiterates this in the beginning of this video, YT93. Now, once you make this claim, obviously the burden of proof is on you, right? So the burden of proof demands a 3-pronged evidence, a 3-part evidence, or 3 evidences, if you like. You might not be able to understand these requirements fully at this point in time, but I'm going to make it crystal clear, inshallah. Don't worry about it. Inshallah, as we progress in this video, these are going to become more and more clear to you. So the first proof that is required for this claim is showing exactly how this parole or locution is a stylistic coded slang or a specialized mode of communication related sociolinguistically to a subgroup, because obviously this is a subject of sociolinguistics. When you say this is a stylistic, a stylized subset of language which in a way is an inside language of a specialized group, of a specific group, then this becomes a subject for sociolinguistics. But I'm going to dwell into this as well, inshallah, in detail. You'll understand it, don't worry. Don't be confused by the jargon, by the terminology. I'm going to explain this at length, inshallah. This is what I've been working on for so many days, to be able to communicate complex academic ideas to the masses, to make them easier to understand. Okay, so that is the first part of the proof, of the proof, or the evidence, if you like. The second part, the second evidence that he needs to bring is how the etymological and morphological study of Quranic words is related to decoding this specialized slang. So he's saying this is a locution. This is pertaining to a group, a specific group, right? It is coded, and we need to decode it. And so only I can decode it, or through my methodology, this could be decoded. Now the question begs the proof, this assertion begs the proof that how it follows from the claim that this is a specialized locution, how does it follow from there that since it is a specialized locution, we will have to apply the morphological, etymological and morphological semiotic methodology upon the text of the Quran to understand it. You will understand these terms in detail, inshallah, as well, but this is the second proof that is required. The third proof that is required is how meanings of words meant for all humankind through a living, breathing tradition can be understood in seclusion by applying modern or postmodern theories to the text. This is extremely important, again, and you will understand this, inshallah, in its entirety. Also, before we proceed, I want to introduce to you, if you're not already familiar with it, the concept of petitio principii. Petitio principii is a fancy Latin name for a circular argument. There are many types of circular arguments, but one very obvious one is when you set out to prove something from that very thing itself. Again, I reiterate, when you set out to prove something using that very thing itself that you have set out to prove. So if I were to prove to you that this pen exists, if I say, look at this pen, how it's moving up and down, that would be a circular argument. First, I'll have to prove that this pen exists in this space and time. Then I can tell you to look at it and its movements, register its movements. This is just an example. You don't need to strawman my argument. I'm just, putting forward an example so you could understand this better. If Dr. Hany Atchan is putting forward a claim that there are locutions in the Quran, parole of other people in the Quran, and because there is this parole, this locution from other people in the Quran, we will apply the etymological, morphological framework of analysis to the text of the Quran. If he's making this claim, then he first will have to prove, number one, how there are locutions in the Quran, in which way they make a structure or substructure or a system of significance. Number two, how does it follow from there? I mean, to make it easier for you, let's for a minute let's agree to whatever he's saying. Let's agree, okay, there are locutions in the Quran. There is uslubul kalam from other people in the Quran. Let's agree to this. How does it follow from here, even if we agree to this, how does it follow that because there are other locutions, other parole present in the Quran, that is why we will apply the morphological, etymological, semiotical, structural methodology to the text of the Quran? How does it follow from there? So before proving to us that it follows from there, that because the Quran contains outside parole, outside uslubul kalam, other locutions, we apply the root structure study, the method of root structure study, juzur and morphology, tasrif, and all these methodologies to the text of the Quran. This is why before you have proven that, you cannot use this methodology to prove it. What Dr. Hany Atchan is doing times and again is, without being able to first prove it, he uses it to prove it from the Quran. I don't agree with Dr. Hany Atchan that you have to go to the jazur, that you have to go to the tasrif, that you have to go to the etymological, morphological study of the units of the language themselves in the text of the Quran. So first, you will have to come on common grounds. Because I don't agree to your methodology, you will have to show me from the outside, from outside the text, or from a commonly understood exegesis or meaning of the Quranic text, that this is so, that this is how it should be done. Then you can apply the methodology and then I'll listen. But Dr. Hany Atchan, without proving it from the outside of the text or from the commonly understood meanings of the text, from the commonly understood and agreed upon exegesis of the text, he tries to prove this very theory from the exegesis that he's done through this theory itself. So you get my point, right? This is circular in nature. These kinds of arguments are non-scholarly, non-academic. They're worthless. So this is one thing that I wanted to highlight. The other thing is the etymological fallacy, and I will come back to this as well in detail. This is a fallacy of logos, speech. Logos in Greek means speech. Drawing false conclusions from the linguistic origins of a word or the alleged meanings or associations of that word in another language. So Allahumma would be a prime example. Also, going too much into the juzur, into the tasarif, into the etymological structuration of words is also a fallacy. And we need to tread carefully around that. But I'll come to this one later, inshallah, in detail. So let's begin without further ado. And these are the timestamps that I'm giving throughout my presentation, if you like, throughout this podcast. So at 4 minutes and 20 seconds, peculiar timing though, he makes a very interesting remark. And he says, all of this is proven from within the Quran as long as we are confident that we are interpreting the Quran correctly. Just wanted to bring your attention once again and reiterate once again the circularity of the argument. This correct interpretation is according to him. And he's saying that there is clear evidence in the Quran about this. That clear evidence is through his own interpretation by applying his own methodology. So you get the way the game is rigged, right? From the beginning. I mean, nobody would have a chance, right? He would say, oh, this is Abrahamic locution in the Quran. There is Abrahamic locution in the Quran, so I need to do the juzur study, the tasrif study, the etymological study, the morphological study. And through that study, it is proven that this is the study that you should do of the Quran. Through this study, it is proven that there is outside locution in the Quran. That's not how it works. So just showing you the scholarship of Dr. Hany Atchan. Definitely an ultra-crepidarian approach. Right. So now the section which is labeled in this segment, where he tells about what he is going to talk about in the whole video. So I've just taken the first section, which is Abrahamic locution. And so the first discussion is Lisaan. This is what we are going to concentrate, inshallah, in today's presentation. Lisaan, locution versus language. All right. So then the next section is the biggest misconception about the Arabs. Here he goes into the diachronic linguistics and synchronic linguistics as well. When he talks about nahv, grammar, that would be a synchronic study of language. And when he talks about tariq wa adab al-Arab, the history of Arabic language, that would be a diachronic study of language. As I show here in this little diagram, that this development along the x-axis, this is x-axis, this is y-axis, right? The verticality is y, the horizontality is x. The development through along the x-axis is the development through history, through time. And if we are studying the history of language, it is called diachronic linguistics. If we are studying the development of a language in a given point in time, along whichever vector it is, that would be a synchronic linguistic study. And by the way, Ferdinand de Saussure is interested in this second type of study, synchronic study. I'll come to that, inshallah. So he begins this section by saying that the Arabs had so many different variations that it could barely be called the same language. And yet it was lumped under a single description called Arabic. So notice that he is now beginning with his proofs, with his evidences. And he chooses to begin by putting forward a claim that anyone who tells you that there was one language of the Arabs is lying to you. I don't think anyone says that, doctor. I don't know if somebody has said that to you. Maybe you're referring to someone in particular. But nobody says that. Nobody makes that claim. Definitely there were lots of variations. And but like you say, they had some common ground. They agreed upon certain rules and regulations. They agreed upon certain ways of communication. And so these were lumped together under the umbrella of Semitic languages. From Sam bin Nuh. Because these had these common factors, these common attributes. And so there is no disagreement on this point. Let's move on. I'm not trying to strawman his arguments, although I could, nitpick and say this or that. No, not really. What he's saying is basically right. There were lots of variations among the Arabic speakers, among the Semitic language speakers, right? And through ghazawat, through travel, through trade, slowly and gradually it became a unified whole. But obviously, the language began as having a lot of differences, having a lot of variations. Nobody disagrees with that. But here is the point. Every language develops over time, right? In diachronic linguistics, we study this very development. So if we look at English language, for example, don't you really know how many foreign language words are today actually part of English language? Let's talk about this for a minute. Now, one of my students was asking me, sir, can't you share these notes that you present in YouTube videos? The problem is I have many digital notebooks. Also, I take notes the analog way, so these are really scattered. So I don't know how to consolidate them all into one PDF and then give it to you. But I'll figure something out. Reach me on Facebook. I'll figure something out for you if you want these notes. Okay, so take English, for example. It is a Germanic language. So German is really at its roots. The spoken dialect is the Anglo-Saxon based one. The cultural group that it belongs to is Proto-Germanic. So it has Proto-Germanic roots. The Angles, Saxons, and the Jutes, when they came together and started living together, English took its basic form. So the Old English, it had words from all of these cultures. Then the Vikings intruded, they attacked, right? They attacked this region that we know as England today. And so a lot of Old Norse, a lot of terms from Old Norse, Nordic terms, they also made their way into the language that we know as English today. In Old English, actually, in fact, if you pick up any book about Old English, you'll find many Nordic words, Nordic terms in that old format of English. Then Normans came from Normandy. So French and Latin words, they became a part of English, and they still are. Kitchen, for example, is a French word. But it has been anglicized. So once it is anglicized, now it is an English word. It will be known as English. So if you compare the two, the Old English and the contemporary English, you'll find out that the Old English was really an amalgamation of Anglo-Saxon culture, culture of Jutes, culture of Vikings, the Old Norse culture, even the Normannic culture, which had French and Latin roots. And something that might appear shocking to you. Now, this is common knowledge. I don't need to give you any references about this. This is common knowledge. You can search Wikipedia, you can search on the internet anywhere. It all originally came from the region today known as Russia. So it is actually the Proto-Germanic family of languages are a descendant of the Proto-Indo-European languages. These are the languages that came from this region that we know as Russia today. So when we talk about English, for example, do we say, oh, but English is not the language of the English people, like Dr. Hany keeps saying in his videos, not just this one, but other videos as well. The Arab is not the language of the Arabs. They were called Arabs because they spoke Arabic language. So what do we say about English? English is not the language of the English people, but English people are called English people because they speak English language. Huh? Is that how it's gonna be now? Okay, if you say so. Anyways, let's move on. I've made the point. You can pick it up if you like. If you don't want to, that's fine. Let's move on. I'm not going to waste my time today. Now he talks about the book Tariq Adab al-Arab. First of all, this is a textbook actually, an old textbook. I think it was first published around 1911 or something, so over a century ago. And this is an Egyptian writer, Mustafa al-Rafi'i. And Dr. Hany Atchan, I think he's an Egyptian too. I heard that. I don't know for sure. But so yeah, very convenient, doctor. But this book is primarily about adab, literatures of Arab, not about the tariq of lughat itself. The author gives you the tariq, he gives you the history, because obviously that's the beginning point of discussing anything and everything that emanates from language, and literature primarily is based on language. So he gives you that preliminaries. But this is a book actually about literature. And here I have put screenshots of its chapters. So you can look at how many chapters are about language and how many chapters are about literature and other things. Only الباب الأول في تاريخ اللغة ونشأتها وتفرعها وما يتصل بذلك. That's just the first chapter. But anyways, no problem. We'll take this old book, no problem. This is a textbook. And by the way, big shout out to Sheikh Omar Baloch. He has a full-fledged video on this book, so if you want to do a deep dive into this book, you can also watch that video by Sheikh Omar Baloch. The important points to note, and I've made a diagram for you consolidating his theory, but one important point that I want you to pay attention to is that he states on page 37, that's right in front of you, العرب منهم العرب أحد الشعوب السامية نسبة إلى سام بن نوح، وهي الأمم التي ذكرت التوراة أنها من نسله، وتسمى لغاتها باللغات السامية أيضا كالعربية والعبرانية والسريانية والحبشية والآرامية وغيرها. Who are the Arabs? Arabs are not called Arabs because they spoke Arabic language. Ultra-crepidarian, Mr. Dr. Ultra-crepidarian, please, sir, لو سمحت. Very humbly. The Arabs were not called Arabs because they spoke Arabic language, but they are called Arabs because they are a descendant of Sam bin Nuh. And وَتُسَمِّي لُغَاتُهَا, and the language that they spoke in, it is called Semitic language. لغات السامية. Sam's language. Sam bin Nuh. Sam bin Noah. Semitic languages. العربية والعبرانية والسريانية والأرامية وغيرها. The Semitic languages, which include the Arabic, the Aramaic, I don't know what you call Syrianiya in English, Syriac, وغيرها, and others as well. It is the language of the Arabs, which is called Arabic. It is not the Arabs are called Arabs because they spoke Arabic. Now, I have shown you from the book itself that you have referred to, right? That is but fair. If you're going to counter this claim, then bring counter evidence, show us scholarly and academically which academic scholarly work refers to Arabs as the ones who spoke Arabic. The works on diachronic linguistics refer to Arabic as the language of the Arabs. That is why it is called العربية, not because it means expressive. Anyways, let's move on. I'll get back to this in a minute because I have another point to make, but I'll get back to this in a minute. Let's move on. Let's not waste any time. Now, there are three tabaqats of Arab, three divisions, categorization of Arab into three categories: Ba'ida, Wa'ariba, wa Musta'araba. And this is his complete theory. Wait, let me show this on your screen in its complete and unadulterated form. Yeah, so let's get rid of my mugshot. So what I suggest you do is you pause the video here and you take a screenshot of this. This is the diachronic model of Arabic language. Call it a model, call it a diagram, call it whatever you like. So we have al-Ba'ida, we have al-Musta'araba and al-Baqiyah. In al-Ba'ida, there is Tasm, Jadis, Abil, Al-Amaliqa, Jasim, Ad, Thamud, Iram, Umim. And then we have Al-Baqiyah. In the Baqiyah, there are two categories, Al-Arabah and Al-Musta'arabah. So in Arabah, there is Hud alayhi salam. From Hud, the descendant is Jurhum. Now Ismail alayhi salam is believed to be from this chain of prophets. And from Ismail alayhi salam we have Quraysh and Huwazin. Right? But from Hud alayhi salam, we also have, besides Jurhum, we have Qahtan. Yaqub alayhi salam is a descendant from this, from this bloodline. And from this bloodline of Qahtan, we also have Ya'rab bin Qahtan. Now, Ya'rab bin Qahtan is what is known as, and his progeny, his bloodline, is what is known as Arabul Yaman. And so according to this old theory, the Arabic language began from Yemen, right? So this is the model, the diachronic model, if you like, for the development of Arabic language. You can pause the video like I told you and take a snapshot and study it and look up the references if you like. Now getting back. So this is Tariq Adab al-Arab, right? This is what the book is about. However, this is an old theory, and there have been new theories, newer theories. So there is this guy, he's called Ahmad Al-Jallad. Ahmad Al-Jallad. Through his reading of the Safaitic scripts, as-Safaiyah, he has put forward the claim that the Arabic language did not begin in Yemen. It began in Syria. And this changes everything, really. I don't want to go into this, but this is a very complex subject, if you like. Let us read a few lines of this excellent article by Saad Abul Hab. I hope I'm pronouncing his last name right. Sorry. He's had a debate with Ahmad Al-Jallad, and he's writing an article now replying to Ahmad Al-Jallad. And this should give us a little insight into what's been going on this diachronic front about Arabic language in recent times. This is the latest research. The key aspect of my readings of the texts of ancient Near East languages stems from my evidence-backed conclusion that these languages should be classified and read as early Arabic. I will explore here this central point by replying to a new theory with an opposite understanding of early Arabia and the Arabic language put forth by Ahmad Al-Jallad, a scholar of ancient Near East languages and scripts. In a recent debate with Al-Jallad, a self-described Semitic linguist, he proclaimed that exchanging the term Semitic for early Arabic or early Fusha is simply a matter of nomenclature. While his interpretation of the term Semitic sounds far more moderate than that of most Western philologists and epigraphists, it is only fundamentally flawed, not only fundamentally flawed and misleading, but also counterproductive. Most scholars, unfortunately, continue to misinform their students and the scholarly community by alluding to a so-called Semitic mother language as a scientific fact. In a recent article, Al-Jallad complained that most Arab scholars rely almost exclusively on classic Arabic dictionaries to decipher ancient Arabic inscriptions written in Musnad and other scripts, but he neglects to see how relying exclusively on modern encryptions-driven, limited in scope linguistic tools have produced erroneous and distorted translations, as we shall demonstrate later on. To put the above claim by Al-Jallad in context, it is important to point out his overall views regarding the history of Arabic language. He believes various ancient forms of Arabic were present many centuries before the rise of classical Arabic in places such as Syria and Jordan. And this is based on his research on the Safavitic scripts. And that the language may have originated there and then migrated south, suggesting that the corrupt forms of Arabic spoken around the region may in fact have lineage older than classical Arabic. His key assertion that Arabic was born in the South Levant and spread southward is the latest of a barrage of current Western scholarly theories aimed at smearing and dismantling the brilliant scholarly work of numerous Islamic Arab linguists and historians over more than 1,000 years. More than 1,000 years. And then he goes on and he pulls in references from Ibn Khaldun and whatnot. But here is the point. The Islamic Arab linguists and historians over more than 1,000 years. Who is he talking about? He's obviously talking about people like Mustafa al-Rafi'i and the rest. And so Ahmad Al-Jallad has come up with a different theory of the diachrony of Arabic language. Right? So this is not that simple a matter. If you are caught up only in ancient books and old theories, you don't know the half of the story, even half of the story. So I humbly suggest that Hany Atchan and co. brushes up on their academic and scholarly knowledge and starts reading the latest research on the subject, especially the research conducted by Ahmad Al-Jallad. What I want to bring to your attention next is, leaving all that aside, leaving the latest research aside and Ahmad Al-Jallad's theories and whatnot, leaving that aside and moving on, what I want to present to you now is an alternative theory, if you like, or a better explanation of what was happening in the Arabian Peninsula before the birth of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the last and final messenger of Allah, Muhammad bin Abdullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So I'm referring you to a book. It's called اللهجات العربية في القراءات القرآنية للدكتور عبده الراجحي. He was أستاذ العلوم اللغوية بجامعة الإسكندرية. So this is not some Tom, Dick or Harry that I'm pointing to. This is a proper scholarly resource. And basically what Dr. Abduhu al-Rajihi is saying, is putting forward through his research, is the claim that roughly some 1,000 years before the birth of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we had a unified Arabic language with just some variations across the geographical division. And these variations can be counted for and can be traced through genealogical lineage. And these were just really variations, mostly in dialects. That is all it was, more or less. I'm not going to go into details and waste anyone's time here. You can read the book yourself. So, but let me just show you very quickly what he says. He says, العلاقة التي بين اللغة واللهجة هي العلاقة التي بين العام والخاص. So for him, the عام is the language or long, and khas, the parole, is the lahja, is the dialect. So the mother language, Arabic, had many dialects. And these dialects, he then bifurcates and attributes to different genealogical lineages. So وسوف نستعمل هنا مصطلحاتهم في تصنيف الأنساب على النحو التالي. And so he divides these genealogical groupings into 6 groups: الشعب, القبيلة, العمارة, البطن, الفخذ, الفصيلة. And then he goes on to show that الواقع اللغوي قبل الإسلام, the fact of the matter was, before Islam, and this is roughly some 1,000 years, 800 to 1,000 years before Islam, that it was a loosely unified language, Arabic language. And the only differences in there were just the differences of lahjat, were the differences of, let's say, dialects, right? So then he goes on, but anyways, I'm not going to waste any more time on this. So let's move on. Just wanted to bring to your attention this theory as well. So we can look at this one as well and not assign exclusivity to just one theory, which says that there were many variations which were more than merely dialectical. That's just one of the theories. Another theory is that these variations were merely dialectical. The next book that Dr. Hany refers to is Al-Madaris Al-Nahwiyya by Dr. Shawqi Dhaif. And this is really the synchronic study of Arabic language, because, as he says himself, that there are differences even after the Quran. So Nahw began with the Quran itself. And let me share this incident with you that we find in the books of Tariq and Hadith. It's a famous incident and really a common knowledge that the schools of grammar did not come into being until after the Quran was revealed. There is this very famous story in which Abu al-Aswad al-Dawli came across someone who was reciting the ayah, Inna Allah bari'um min al-mushrikeen wa rasuluhu, in the wrong way. Maybe he was reciting wa rasulahu, because if you say rasulahu and if you say rasuluhu, there is a difference between the morphological structure, and one is fa'il, one is maf'ul. Rasuluhu is fa'il. Inna Allah bari'um min al-mushrikina wa rasuluhu, that Allah and Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam are both bari'um min al-mushrikeen. They are both free of the mushrikeen, of the matters of the mushrikeen, of the things of the mushrikeen that they say, of the web of deceit that they weave, etc., etc. However, if you read this, as wa rasulahu, then the meaning becomes that Allah is free from mushrikeen and the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam, ma'adallah. The meaning completely changes, completely. So rasuluhu is the fa'il form, the doer form, that Allah is doing this thing. He is freeing himself and his messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam both from the deceits and the matters of the mushrikeen. Whereas if you read it as rasulahu, it becomes maf'ul, and so the meaning completely changes. It then becomes an insulting verse for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Ma'adallah min zalik. So this guy Abu al-Aswad ad-Dawli, he came across this guy reading Inna Allah bariyun min al-mushrikina wa rasulahu, and so he went to Hazrat Ali ibn Abi Talib karramallahu wajhahul kareem, who after listening to this, he wrote down some basics of the grammar for Arabic language and gave that paper to Abu al-Aswad and said, Inhu hadha nahv, proceed in this direction. And this is why this is called nahv. Hazrat Ali bin Abi Talib karramallahu wajhul kareem said, Inhu hadha nahv. Here, these are some basics of the Arabic grammar. Now proceed in this direction. So this is considered to be the starting point of the discipline of Nahv. And Al-Madaris al-Nahwiya is another textbook really. It just lists what these differences are, what the Kufi school is saying, what the Iraqi school is saying, so on and so forth. Sabawayh and who not, Marahul Arwah and what not. So, moving on, do I have a major difference on this with Dr. Hany Atchan? No. Yes, absolutely. Nobody would disagree that there were variant forms of Arabic language prevalent in the region at that time, and then slowly the language became consolidated, became unified, but the various forms of differences remained. And in fact, differences in interpreting grammar and the nuances of grammar and grammatical structuration, it really began after the Quran was revealed. So there is really no difference of opinion there. It's just that when Dr. Hany Atchan says that Arabic language is not the language of the Arabs, but the Arabs were called Arabs because they spoke Arabic language, that is something I have a problem with, because it is a claim that is unfounded, ungrounded in any sort of evidence. And this is something that we are going to dwell into a little more detail right now. So the timestamp is 9:55, and Dr. Hany Atchan says, so when someone tells you there is a single Arabic language, they are lying or are ignorant. Single Arabic language, you just said above at 826, and yet it was lumped under a single description called Arabic. So it is a single description, it is a single language, it was known as a single language, it is known as a single language. That's what we are saying. How is this being ignorant or lying? You yourself have admitted to this. Just pointing out his scholarship and academic reach to you, Just doing that. Whomsoever wants to take it, take it. Whomsoever doesn't want to take it, no problem. Not going to waste my time. Let's move on. There is not a single language called Arabic. keep this in mind for a couple of minutes. I'll make a reference to it shortly. Now, the next section in his video, titled Lisaan, Locution, Not Language. Arabic is not the language of the Arabs. Arabs were referred to as Arabs because they spoke, even if not perfectly, Arabic. This is Dr. Hany Atchan's claim, and he provides absolutely no evidence for it. In fact, I've just shown you from a book that he has referred to, تاریخ و آداب العرب, that the Arab are basically known as Arab because they were descendants of Sam bin Nuh, and they spoke from the Lughat Samiyah. They spoke from the languages collectively called the Semitic languages. And Arabic from the Semitic languages is called Arabic, is known as Arabic because the Arabs spoke this language. That is why it's called Arabic. And I have a couple of questions here. So if this is not the language of the Arabs, but Arabs were called Arabs because they spoke Arabic, then whose language is Arabic? Obviously, if they were, it's not their language, and they are only called Arab because they speak this language or spoke this language and are still speaking this language, then it must have been somebody else's language, right? That they were speaking and are speaking right now. And so they're called the Arab people. So whose language is it actually? And how was it developed over time? Any scholarly references to back this claim up? I mean, let's go to Google Dictionary, for example. If you look up the word Arabic in Google Dictionary, it says, the Semitic language of the Arabs. From those Lughat Samiyah, the language that Arabs spoke came to be known as Arabic language because it was spoken by the Arabs. The Semitic language of the Arabs, spoken by some 150 million people throughout the Middle East and North America. Now, I'm not going to any classical resource, not going to any tradition. I'm showing you from Sheikh Jujal itself, right? So bring evidence if you have a counterclaim. What is the evidence for your counterclaim? Also, when you keep saying this, and now I'm referring back to this quote and this quote. And I said, please note these, I'll refer back to these. So now I'm referring to this quote. He's saying there is not a single language called Arabic. So that means there are many languages. So what were these other languages called? If these were languages other than Arabic, that's the claim that you're making. You're saying there were other languages and they were lumped together as Arabic because they shared some rules. So what was these other languages called that were then lumped under the label of Arabic? What are those languages known as today? Any scholarly references to any of this? Now, let me refer you back to his quote at the timestamp 826, when he said these were variations in the language. So that we agree to variations in the language, not different languages. And then he says there were rules that most of them agreed upon. he makes a claim without any references that basically it was an expressive way of presenting information. Hence, it was referred to as Arabic. And he says Araba is basically it means to express. Now, this is completely false. Show me where it refers to as something being expressive. Araba, he expressed. You mean to say it means he expressed? I've heard of Araba, I think. I don't recall exactly what that means. But I've never heard of or never read Araba as a verb form of mad, as a past verb form. Maybe you're trying to say this is the root, Ain, Ra, Ba, Araba. Then show us where it is so. What is your scholarly reference? Are there any scholarly references, or are we just supposed to believe it because you're saying so? Is Hebrew not expressive? How about French or German languages? Only Arabic is an expressional language? And Araba means to express? What are we talking about here? Complete falsehood. There is no reference for this. There is no evidence for this. For all of this, there is no evidence. There's a very pertinent question that I also need to ask you guys here. And that is language a human construct? Or is it something divinely revealed suddenly in different points in time? I'll tell you what, we're going to come back to this one in a minute. So, again, clear evidence, when he talks about clear evidence, it should not be petitio principii. It should not be circular. It should not be a circular argument. So 14 minutes and 17 seconds onward, we get into the linguistic terminology. But before we get into all of this, let me caution you, this is extremely technical. But please bear with me. I am, inshallah, going to communicate this to you in simplistic and understandable terms. And that is why I'm going to spend time on certain concepts to bring a certain context to some of the things that were left vague by Dr. Hany Atchan. And it happens really when it is not your field. When you are an ultra-crepidarian venturing into an academic field and it's not your field, you tend to use certain terms, you tend to make use of certain terms without the full background knowledge, without knowing the scholarship, the academia to which these terms belong to. And so some things are left vague then, or the meaning and the sense that you convey becomes erroneous really, because you don't have the fullest grasp of all the concepts involved in those theoretical constructs. So I'm going to bring that context, inshallah, and I'm going to try and make it as easy as possible for you guys. Just bear with me. Don't be alarmed if it becomes suddenly very technical. I'm going to, inshallah, unravel these mysteries, inshallah. So, timestamp 14 minutes, 17 seconds onward. And he says, some Arabs use Arabic, but they have different locution. And then he makes something clear and says, I never said locution is not Arabic. Well, the problem is that you, doctor, have made a case that Arabic is not the language of the Arabs, right? You've just made this claim. It is an expressive language, and that is why it is called Arabic. And so consequently, you cannot relegate linguistic authority to Arabs. You've made this claim, right? And then you say there were so many different languages. There were so many different variations that these could hardly be called Arabic, and yet these were lumped together under one umbrella of Arabic language. So when you make these claims, people think when you're talking about locution now, maybe you're talking about another language. Maybe you're talking about, maybe you're saying, maybe you're putting forward a claim that there is something other than Arabic in the Quran. So I think that is where the confusion emanates from. But thank you for clearing this up. No problem. Let's move on. Now you're making a case that Arabs speak in different locutions. Right? First you said Arabic is not the language of the Arabs. Now you're saying Arabs speak in different locutions. So these locutions are Arabic, right? You just said, I never said that locution is not Arabic. So whose locutions are these? Are these the locutions of the Arabs? So then it is the language of the Arabs, right? You see my point about Dr. Hany Atchan's scholarship? This is what happens when you're an ultra-crepidarian man. Anyways, let's move on. Let's not try and strawman Dr. Hany Atchan's arguments. We're not going to do that. I'm not in a habit to, first of all, polemics is not really my field. And this is something that was pointed out to me in the peer review of my journal article about the Qura'at in reference with Ghamdi's essay, that your article is too polemic in its nature. And polemics is not my field. I was pushed into it by my students, by my subscribers, by my commentators, people who comment on my videos and start and keep asking about other people, Sheikh Imran Hussain, Ghamidi. People asked me about Hany Atchan. And so here I am, right, doing these polemics and whatnot. Although this is not my field, I've never liked polemics. I've never wanted to be a polemic. I've never wanted to venture into polemics. But hey, what can you say? You know, life happens, right? And if even one person gains something from this, alhamdulillah, I have done my job. At least on the Yawm al-Qiyamah, Yawm al-Hisab, I'd be able to beg Allah for His mercy. I beg Allah for His mercy all the time. But I'll be able to beg Him and say, oh Allah, at least one person got something out of it. So please make it enough for me to not to go into Jahannam, to not to go into Jahim, to not to go into Nar. And yeah, Rabbana qina azab an-nar, qina azab an-nar. So yeah, that's really the motivation behind all of this. By the way, and I'm not going to take any names or anything, not even going to mention. Just going to say, just going to look you in your eyes, man. Just going to look you in the eye and ask you, do I even look like somebody who's concerned with the economic and commercial side of affairs? Does it look like I care what you think? Does it look like I care about how many subscribers I have? Or if my channel is monetized or not? You really think I'm here for the money or fame or subscribers? Do I look like somebody who would be concerned with the commercial aspect of things? I mean, really, for real? Think again, my friend. Think again. You're mistaken. You really are. Anyways, moving on. Now we are entering into the linguistic discussions known as sociolinguistics. The synchronic linguistics, the sociolinguistics, the linguistics which is concerned with milieu, the socio-cultural environment that shapes and develops a language in a given point in time. One country understands one word in one way, and another country understands the same word in a different way. This is a claim that Dr. Hany Atchan makes at 15:48. 15 minutes and 48 seconds. And he says this is the case even with proper Arabic Fusha, even with the proper Arabic language. First of all, this is false. You need to bring evidence for this, Dr. Hany. Lugha Fusha is understood across the spectrum, be it Arabic, English, French, whichever language. The formal language which is taught at universities, at schools, which is the official language of a state, is always understood across the spectrum. It doesn't have that kind of variations. كيف حالك? This is فصحى. كيف حالك? This is عامية. زي صحتك. زي حالك. إزيك? In your locution, Dr. Hany Atchan, يا دكتور عطشان. In your locution, they say إزيك? What's up? What up? What up? Right? In my Arabic locution, the عامية السعودية, they say كيف حالك؟ كيفك أنت؟ كيفك أنت؟ إيش أخبارك؟ إيش أخبارك؟ كيف أسرتك؟ In Lebanon, they say شوشبك شوشبك كيفك أنت؟ بالإمالة. They do imala with all the things. Imala is their locution, is their lahja, is their dialect. Bitfitme, this is Lebanese Amiya. Ad-Dini Moya, this is Saudiya Amiya. But the Fusha across all these countries would stay the same. أعطيني الماء. أتستطيع أنت يا دكتور أن تتكلم باللغة العربية الفصحى? This is a question in Fusha language, right? كنت عليل. Anyways, there are lots of examples. Like, something very funny actually came to my mind. Something we used to say when we were playing in the streets of Makkah as children back in Mamlakat al-Saudiya al-Arabiyya. Anyways, so the Fusha, it stays the same across the spectrum. You need to show us with evidence which Fusha changes its meanings across the spectrum. Which Fusha words and constructs mean one thing in Mamlakat al-Saudiya al-Arabiyya and mean another thing in Misr, for example, in Qahira, for example, or in Dimashq, or in Sham, in Syria, in Iraq. كيف حالك? What does it mean in Iraq? And what does it mean in Saudi? Show us. But he fails to bring an evidence for this claim. Now here is the peculiar thing. The examples that Dr. Hany Atchan gives from here on are all examples of different words. For example, he says, look at chap or lad and man. In UK English, we say chap. In USA English, we say man. Now, are these same words understood differently, or are these different words understood same? Oh man. These are different words for the same meaning, not different meanings of the same word, right? Lorry and truck, both are used for the same meaning across different countries. Mate and friend, although I strongly suspect that the Australian counterpart to friend is bloke. I strongly suspect, but don't quote me on that. Maybe Dr. Hany Atchan has done his research on this. I haven't yet. So anyways. Now he puts forward a very interesting claim, and the timestamp is 1622. And this is really central to this discussion, to this debate. So please pay attention. Locution is localized to a group of people or a time limit or with a certain contextual constraints, such as a community of practice, for example, etc. Locution is localized to a group of people or a time limit. When you say this, you are actually bringing in the known definition of slang, and you are applying that on locution. This is the confusion, the scholarly confusion of the scholar who is Hany Atchan. Later on, we'll see that he will equate this term with parole. Now he's equating it with slang. Anyways, this is the dictionary definition of locution. An utterance regarded in terms of its intrinsic meanings or references, as distinct from its function or purpose in context, style, and idiom. So it is distinct from its function in context or its style and idiom. It is bringing intrinsic meanings or references, right? So from here on, we are entering into the theoretical constructs which are generally known as semantics. What is semantics? Semantics is concerned with meanings. Generally, we are all concerned with meanings, right? How meanings are produced. What are meanings? Semantics is the branch of philosophy which concerns itself with textual meanings especially. So how meanings are produced in a given text, that is the subject of semantics. And semantics is generally bifurcated into two major types. Logical semantics, which is really philosophy, and lexical semantics, which includes hermeneutics and semiotics, which is then the literary semantics. Now, in the pragmatic model, verbal communication takes place when three things are met: locution, illocution, and perlocution. So locution is the semantic or literal significance of the utterance, the parole. Like I showed you before, intrinsic meanings or references, the reference to the structure of signification as a willful act of speech. So locution is the semantic or literal significance of the utterance. Illocution is the intention of the speaker. And perlocution is how it was received by the listener. So when these three things are met, verbal communication happens. This is the paradigmatic model of verbal communication. Don't be confused about these things. I'm explaining all of these terms and trying to simplify. In fact, I'm in danger of oversimplifying certain things. And if an academic or a scholar is listening to this, my apologies. Because when you oversimplify certain things, some of its complexity, the value in its complexity is lost. And the academic value, some of the academic value is lost. So, but anyways, don't be confused about this. I'm just showing you what locution actually means. We're going to come to what Dr. Hany Atchan takes it to mean, but I'm just showing you what it actually means. So locution, the term locution is actually a part of paradigmatic structure, paradigmatic model of verbal communication. Now, at the timestamp 18 minutes and 47 seconds, he finally makes the claim individual speech is referred to as locution, parole. And so now we enter into the semiotic model of communication. Langue and parole. I have been corrected many times by my professors that the correct pronunciation of this word is langue, not lang. So my apologies, sir. And parole. Now I was telling you about the quest for meanings. Meanings in life. Meanings in words. Meanings in text, right? And the most famous theory for searching for meanings in a given text by far is the theory of structuralism. And Ferdinand de Saussure was a structuralist linguist. These terms, langue and parole, are terms from structuralism. So let us understand structuralism. Classical structuralism basically stands upon what is known today in the post-Derridian world, post-Derridian literary world, as logocentrism. Logocentrism puts forth a claim that meaning is originally inherent within the structure of reality, that there is a structure of reality and meanings reside in that structure of reality. The logos, which resides outside this structure as the ultimate truth, is reached through these meanings within. And I'm going to explain this in greater detail. But understand this with the help of this visual representation. Look at it for a minute. There is this structure of reality in which there are other structures. And the relationship of these structures is what produces meanings. And so outside this structure is logos, the ultimate truth, the ultimate reality. You know, take it to mean God, take it to mean religion, take it to mean Donald Duck, whatever. The ultimate objective truth. And you can reach logos only through these structures which are inherent in reality itself. This is logocentrism. So, to understand structuralism simply, let's just say that structuralism says that there is a structure, right? So everything that we see around you is part of a structure. It represents a relationship with others, with other things. Some kind of a relationship. It is all related. And through this relativity, this structure, meanings can be reached. And through those meanings, we can reach the outside truth, the ultimate truth. This is structuralism in its oversimplified form. Let me make it even clearer to you. Let's look at a story, for example, and I just made it up. Let's look at it, for example, the story of a father and a son. Although, if there are some literary students out there, they'll find that I draw heavily on Terry Eagleton. Of course, I've read a lot of Terry Eagleton, so maybe I'm inspired by him, and you'll find some similarities between my way of saying things and the way he has put forth his understanding of these things. So the story of a father and a son. There is a father who has a son. One night, the son has a fight with his father and leaves the home. As he's walking, as the son is walking, he falls into a ditch because it is the night time and it is not visible. The ditch, he couldn't see the ditch, so he falls in it. He falls in a ditch. He's eloping from home. He's going away from home. He's walking. There's a ditch, but it's nighttime, so he falls in it. He couldn't see it. The father wakes up after some point in time, in a specific point in time where dawn is very close, and finds that his son is missing. He's nowhere to be found. He realizes that the quarrel they had might have caused him to run away. So he's worried. So he sets out to look for his son. As the father is walking across the same path, the sun comes up, and through the illumination that is provided by the sun, he sees the ditch and sees his son trapped inside of it. So he takes the son out. They are reunited. They make up, and they live happily ever after. It's a simple story. It's a very simple, basic story. For a structuralist, nothing would make sense but the structure of the story itself. As a unit of reality, because art is imitation of life, so in that sense it is a unit of reality. As a unit of reality, the structure inherent within this unit is the only thing through which we can reach the truth. That is what a structuralist would tell you. So within this reality, within the reality, we have this reality of the story. This story has a structure, and so the meanings are linked to this structure. And only through this structure we can reach the meanings. Now, if you pick up Aristotle's Poetics, he talks about these structures inherent in stories and storytelling at length. So let's look at it from Freytag's point of view. Since you guys are so interested in the stories of Yusuf alayhi salam and whatnot, this is the structure of stories according to Aristotle. And this is the interpretation of that structure by Gustav Freytag. So let me make it easier for you. Let me show you this structure through this story that I just told. So there is an exposition, meaning you are introduced to the characters. Father-son relationship. This is the exposition. Then there is a conflict. Every story needs to have a conflict. That is their fight. That the son fights with dad. No matter what he fights upon. Maybe he wants to go to a party, a late night party on his own, and his father won't let him, whatever. Then there is rising action. The son elopes and falls in a ditch. this is the rising action, right? Now, you feel somewhat of a thrill. You know, you say this is a thrilling and a gripping story because there is the rise of action, right? So when the sun elopes, the sun gets out of the house and then falls into a ditch, there is some sort of thrill that is developed there, right? Oh, what's going to happen next? Is the son going to die? Is the father ever going to find him? And so then there is climax. Climax is always built upon the rising action. The climax is that the father wakes up, finds out that his son is missing, and sets out to find him. So you're really on the edge of your seat now. Oh, what's going to happen next? Is he going to find him? Is he going to be able to find him? After climax, after the story has reached that climax, there is a falling action. So the father finds the son with the help of the son, right? No pun intended. And then there is resolution. If there is a conflict, there needs to be a resolution. Pity and fear, remember, for those of you who are literature students, Aristotle's two main elements in the story, pity and fear, invoke pity and fear. Anyways, so the resolution is that they are reunited. And then there is denouement or exodus in Greek tragedy. In this structure, the denouement is that they sort out their differences and they live happily ever after. Now, this is the complete structure. Please pay attention. This is very important. This is extremely important to the discourse at hand, and I will build upon this. So if you don't understand this, you won't be able to understand my conclusions. You won't be able to understand the case that I am going to make. Right? Or my counter case to Hany Atchan's claims, as it were. So this is important to understand. Structuralism and post-structuralism is important to understand the case that I will make in conclusion. So father-son relationship, then their fight. The son elopes, falls into the ditch. Father wakes up, goes out seeking his son, finds his son, they make up, live happily ever after. 6 or 7 points. This is the structure of this story. This is the meaning inside the story. Now, what is the meaning outside of this structure? The logos that is related to this structure, to this particular structure, to this particular story, that is that you get a sense of familial relationships from this story. There is a theme of love and happiness. And so really the story sets out to bring about emphatically the effects of love and happiness on human life, generally speaking, universally speaking. Then there is this theme of hate versus love. And in familiar relationships, is hate really sustainable? Right? That is a question. The son and the father, they fought. But because they're family, their fight is not forever. It's not like they're going to live their lives apart just because they fought on a little thing. So this is a universal logos from this structure. You get, or moral if you like, right? In normal children's books terms, we can say that these are morals of the story. When you make a child read a storybook or tell him or her a story, you always talk about the moral of the story. You want the children to learn something from it, from these stories that you have told them or that they have read. And that is the logos, that is the ultimate truth, the universal truth that you get to through that structure of the story. Role of the father, what is the role of the father? Importance of light vis-a-vis darkness. That is another universal moral that we can get to through this structure. And ties that are unbreakable. So the ultimate truth outside this structure are the universal morals that are reached through this structure. Without this structure inherent in reality, there is no meaning. Notice how you can substitute everything within this structure with anything and everything else. As long as the structure is intact, the meaning will be the same. This is the important point that I wanted to make. So please remember this. Let me elaborate on this. Father-son structure. The structure of Exodus. What am I saying? The structure of the exposition. The father-son relationship structure. So in this story, we have a human father and a human son. You can substitute it with a tiger and her cub. It would stay the structure would stay the same. There was a tigress who had a cub. The cub fought with the mother and ran away, fell into a ditch, or was captured by somebody. You get the drift, right? You can even substitute with a bird and its chicks. As long as there is a father-son relationship, an ancestor-progeny relationship, you will have the structure. Then the conflict structure, they have to have a fight. Now in this story, in this particular story, the human father and human son fought on something. The tigress and her cub would fight on something else, so on and so forth. Fatal danger structure. The son, the progeny, needs to get into a fatally dangerous situation from which it can be rescued by the ancestor, by the father, by the mother. As long as this structure remains within this broader structure of the story, no matter who you're talking about or what kind of a danger you're talking about, the structure would stay the same, and so the morals would be the same. The meanings, the ultimate meanings would be the same. You getting my point? Then the quest structure. The parent, the progeny, needs to get out and find the son, find the progeny. If it is a human father, it is a human father. If it is a tigress, it is a tiger. It is a lion, it is an eagle. It is a bird. Whatever, whoever, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. If the structure remains intact, if there is a quest for this fatally endangered progeny that has eloped, then the moral would be the same. Then the ending structure. There needs to be an end to this story. You know, be it a tragedy, be it a comedy, be it a tragi-comedy, they lived happily after structure, whatever. But there needs to be an end. And in this particular story, the structure is that they lived happily ever after. As long as this structure is met, no matter in which shape, way, or form, or no matter who is going to live happily ever after, the moral of the story would be the same. The moral from the structure would be the same. So this is very important. In structuralism, the structure is the meaning. As long as you have the structure, you will always have the meaning from within the structure, which leads to the meanings outside of the structure, the universal morals. This is structuralism in its simplest form. Now, if you are a literature student, I hope this helps you in your studies. But even if you're not a literature student, this is extremely important to learn and understand. I'll come to it in a minute why it is so important. I will tell you, but you're going to find out yourself, in fact. But let's continue with this, and let's see what structuralism then is in its simplest form. The structure can be applied to our everyday life, and we can reach the ultimate truth through the study of this structure. So what is structure in its simplest form? Structure is the relativity of certain elements, the relationship of certain elements to each other. A father and son who fight, son is in danger because he chooses to leave the father. The father comes to the rescue, and so they live happily ever after. This is the relationship of different elements to each other. As long as this relationship is followed, you will have the morals of the story, that familiar relationships count. There are unbreakable relationships which are not broken by mundane everyday fights. You should not make hasty decisions. The father figure is ultimately responsible for the progeny, so on and so forth. Love, happiness, whatever. Also closely related to this concept, is the concept of a center. That there is always a center of things in the structure. So the center is, in classical structuralism, the center is the logos. And the periphery, the edges, the margin is the disbursement of meanings from the structure. Now, post-colonial theory is actually based on this structure, because then the colonizer is at the center and the colonized is at the periphery, symbolically speaking. And this is the structure that post-colonial theory seeks to break. Refer to Edward Said and others, especially Frantz Fanon. Black skin, white masks, or is it white skin, black skin, white masks? Frantz Fanon was an excellent writer. Anyways, an interesting example that comes to mind is that of King Kong. Now look at King Kong, for example. I'm talking about the 2005 version of King Kong, which stars Naomi Watts. So, Kong's Skull Island is invaded by the colonizers. In turn, Naomi then gets captured by the colonized, which is the beast. But then the colonizers capture the beast and bring him to the city. In the end, the beast dies. And so look at this structure as an exercise. And what is the logos? What is the outside truth, outside ultimate objective truth that the study of the structures within this movie King Kong bring about? Just as an exercise. Do it and you'll find it very helpful for understanding, for clarity of concepts. Now, with onslaught of science, scientific analysis, and a need for academic disciplines to make sense out of the so-called chaos, the schools of literary theory formed. Up till this point, structuralism, the structuralism that I've been discussing with you, the classical form of structuralism, did not take shape as a literary theory. There was not even a term Post-Structuralism before Edward Titchener, who was a student of Wilhelm Wundt. Now, I think everyone knows about Freud, Sigmund Freud, but very few people know about Wundt. Wundt is actually the father of modern psychology. He was born in 1832 and died in 1920. So anyways, I don't want to go into that. He used the term structuralism, Edward Titchener, to explain the structure of human mind. Ding, ding, ding. Id, ego, superego, anyone? It was then picked up by new criticism, which was known primarily through formalism, where structuralism analyzes the units of language in a text and how these units produce meanings through the underlying universal structures. Formalism concentrates on the language units more, rejecting the external to the text itself. And so now we are entering into new criticism and modern structuralism. And so Northrop Frye, who was born in 1912 and died in 1991, so he's somebody extremely relevant. In his book, Anatomy of Criticism, Northrop Frye says that literary criticism is in a sorry state of unscientific mess and needs to be tidied up. I understand that for some of you, this must have been tiring and this must have been something that is becoming tiresome and you're getting fed up at some level. You might be getting fed up. But this is extremely important to the discussion at hand because we are all looking for meanings in text, right? Isn't that what the Quranis are doing? Looking for meanings, for the ultimate meanings in the text of the Quran itself, right? So this is all very central to the discussion, to the discourse at hand. And so bear with me a few moments more, and this will all make sense. So Northrop Frye basically said this is all haphazard. So we need to place things in a theoretical structure, so to speak, in a scientifically theoretical structure. And so he came up with the idea of autonomous verbal structure, but let's not go into this. But this is how semantics was born. Applying, and Northrop Frye, what he was doing on a, well, the academics and scholars might differ with me on this, I understand that. But for me, at least, at some level, what he was doing was he was applying Ferdinand de Saussure's theories and bringing an order to the so-called chaos in this field. So, what semantics proposes is that the value in the text is contained within the structure of language, which produces meaning. One more time. Value of a text, this text. Value of this text is contained within the structure of language of this text, which produces meanings. So these are the meanings which are inside the structure of language. This is semantics. So it's a shift from broader metaphysical or philosophical to a specific contained tangible unit. for scientific clarity and certainty, right? This is the shift from outside to inside, structures within a structure, so to speak. In the story above, for example, the story of the father and son, each structure is meaningful in itself now. It is self-contained. The meanings are contained within these structures. There is no outside truth, logos, for that matter. So this is now modern structuralism. It is still structuralism if you assert that these meanings are relative within the structure, but you are doing away with the logocentrism. At some level, there is some sort of logocentrism still, because unless you do away with the structure completely, you cannot do away with logocentrism, you cannot do away with the concept of this outside truth. But at some level, you have now said that the meanings are contained within the language of the text itself. And this is actually semiotics, which is applied to the text. And when semiotics is applied to the text, it becomes semantics. I'll explain this in detail. Don't worry, don't worry. We are looking for meanings. This is the real issue. How are meanings produced in a text? How can you get to the meanings of a text? This is the quest, right? So you have, first of all, the classical structuralism that really started with the Greeks, Aristotle and such. That everything has a structure and the meaning is really within the structure. And I've shown you this through the story, through the structure of the story that I explained. Then we have a shift from this abstract to the concrete. Because in this way, the structure is abstract. Everything is related to everything else, right? And Northrop Frye and Ferdinand de Saussure, because they were living in an era, in a time of scientific analysis, of tangibility, they wanted to have a concrete unit which they can analyze. They then shifted the focus from the metaphysical to the concrete. And they said, the meanings really are contained within a structure which resides in the structure of things. And that is the structure of language. So language is a concrete thing that you can analyze, that you can touch, so to speak. And so they made a sense of this chaos. This is the quest for meaning in text, right? So son and son binary, and this is a very central term to structuralism, binary opposition, and we'll come to it in a minute. For example, has its own meaningfulness, and we don't need to find any outside meanings in it. Because this is the language, and language in itself produces meanings. In simpler words, content versus form. Form is not without meaning, but its meaning is contained within the very form itself. Whereas content points to relational structures, form is only concerned with the structure of itself. It is the structure of relations between the units. Like I showed you, between the elements themselves that matters. So that structure between the elements matters for classical structuralism. What the language itself is telling me, grammar, morphology, syntax, literary devices, etc., is then the structure within this structure. And so modern structuralism shifted the focus from the abstract to the concrete. With me so far? So this is the literary structuralism. Let me show this to you in its entirety. literary structuralism, and this is extremely, extremely important to understand, because this is central to this discourse. This is central to this debate. So what is literary structuralism then? Modern structuralism. There are three distinct features of this modern structuralism. The first is that it is analytical in approach. So it is not evaluative. No external value is applied to a text. Every text is equal in its value as being a text, number one. Number two, displacement. Structuralism is not concerned with the obvious too much, modern structuralism, even classical structuralism. In order for it to reach to the meanings, it seeks to isolate certain deep structures within, like structure of language within the structure of events. So the apparent is not important. The apparent is there is a father and there is a son. But what is the deeper structure? The deeper structure is the relationship, the relational structure, father-son relationship. So it could be any father-son relationship. What is important is the structure, the underlying structure. And in modern structuralism, what is important is the language that constructs this relationship. Okay? And the third and most important point is that structuralism is, says that a text is self-contained. That it is to say that the content of the narrative is its structure. So the narrative for structuralism, in a way, is about its own self. Its subject is its own internal relations, its own modes of sense-making and meaning-producing. This requires a lot of deliberation, but let me make it easier for you. For modern structuralism, everything is about the structures within the structures. Everything is about that. So there is a structure of reality that it imitates. There's a father, there's a son, so it's a family. Families exist, right? It's a reality, and so it imitates this structure, so that's the broader structure. Then there is the structure within that structure, which is a specific structure. Then there is a structure of events, like we just went through. There are certain events related, linked to each other, that's a structure. Then there is the structure of the language that conveys all this, and the manner in which it conveys all this. And so this text is contained within itself. Its subject is not something outside of it, not logos. It is not trying to reach to an ultimate truth, the text. It is not trying to convey any morals, any universal morals or any universal values. What it is trying to convey to you is this very relationship between its own structures. And through these relationships, through the understanding of this structuration, the meanings emerge. Those are the meanings that matter. So for example, in the previous example, in the classical structuralism example, we saw that this structure where there is a father and a son, and the son elopes, son runs away, but the father goes on to still care for the son and saves him at the end of the day, and they live happily after. That from this structure, we learn the value of familiar relationships. That is the logos from the structure, right? Outside this structure. In this case now, this is self-contained. Now we are going to look for what meanings this structure produces for itself, within itself. So we're going to look at the language and how it conveys these interrelationships. For example, I talked about sun and sun binary, sun, the progeny and sun in the sky. And so the sun goes and falls down, whereas the sun comes up. So there is a high and a low. And this high and low, this produces meanings. So what is high and what is low? Maybe his decision, his willing act of defiance, the sun's willing act of defiance is the darkness. And Father's overarching nature, forgiving nature, loving nature is the light. Maybe that is the meaning contained within this structure. Or somebody can read it in psychoanalytical terms, in Oedipal terms, and say that it is the rebellion of the son against the father, which establishes the system which seeks to bring order to chaos. Unless the son rebels, there is, let's say, no way forward. So this rebellion is what gives vent. His willing act of defiance, the son's willing act of defiance, is what gives the story the meaning. It is what establishes the value of love. Think about it this way. Now, this is the psychoanalytical way. Think about it this way. If the son would not have ever fought with the father would not have realized how much he loved his son, and that is the meaning. There is no outside meaning. This is the meaning within. This is the meaning within the structure. This is the meaning within the story. This is the meaning within the text. So you're getting my point now? This is really as simple as I can get it to be. All right? And I'm really telling you what professors would take years to tell you in universities. So this is classical structuralism and modern structuralism. So yeah, let's move forward. And let's now come to the point, the actual point of this discourse. Now let's try and understand Saussure and where he's coming from. In the 60s, literary structuralism started to incorporate the theories and insights of the famous modern linguist Ferdinand de Saussure, born in 1857, died in 1913. It is important to note that structuralism did not change in any way, shape, or form the modern structuralism that we just talked about. Saussure's theory only provided more tools for structuralist analysis and discourse, bringing even more focus to language of the text as its primary structure. So the focus is now on the language itself. Saussure is interested in synchronic linguistics. This is very important to note. For him, meanings in language are produced through a sign. A sign is made up of a signifier and a signified. So there is a symbol side and there is an idea side. There is an expression side and there is a content side. There is a material form which links to an ideal form. For example, when I say pen, what do you understand if you speak English? You understand that I am referring to this thing, pen, with which you write. When I say tiger, what do you understand? You understand that this animal is referred to. When I say anger, what do you understand? You understand that this is the emotion that I am referring to. This is the emotion that I'm referring to when I'm saying anger. So pen, tiger, and anger, these three are symbols as units of sounds or as lexemes, as units of written words. as written words or as spoken words. These are symbols. But these are linked with ideas which are commonly shared between you and me. Right? So the sign is made up of an ideal, the idea, and the symbol. P-E-N is the symbol for this idea. This is the sign that Ferdinand de Saussure talks about. And he says, meanings are produced through these signs. This is what meaning is. When you speak or write this sign, the meaning is produced through this ideal form. Okay? The relationship between a signifier, now this is called a signifier. The symbol is a signifier, and this idea is the signified. These are two sides of the same coin, or two sides of the same page, if you like. The relationship between a signifier and a signified is an arbitrary one. Nobody came down from heavens and told you pen means pen, pen means this pen. This is an arbitrary relationship that developed through time, over time, through conventions. That is to say that conventions, cultures, societies, etc., assign these concepts to symbols. These are not inherent within the symbols themselves. Structure within the structure. Meanings in these signs are produced through difference. The signifier goat, for example, gives a signified this goat because it is different from boat or bat or cat. So the meaning is always a result of division and articulation of signs because you have said or written goat and not boat. So now understand this. And we need to understand this very simply in concrete terms and once and for all, inshallah. So according to Ferdinand de Saussure, what is meaning? Meaning is the difference between signs. When you say cat, and we share the language, I understand that you are referring to the animal that meows, meow. And you are not referring to a rooster, for example, or an elephant. So, this word cat is different from elephant or bat or rat, and that is why it has the meaning that it has. Okay? Now this is Saussure as simple as it gets. In the most simplest terms possible. Meaning, what is meaning? Meaning is a sign which is different from other signs. So meaning is a result of the difference. It is not a result of convention. It is not a result of anything else. Try to understand this. It is a result of difference that the sign that is being created, being produced, has with other signs. So it's related to other signs in a manner of difference. And this is what produces meanings in language. Let's look at this diagram, for example. So what is meaning? Meaning is the sign which has a signifier and a signified both, which has a symbol and an idea linked to that symbol. Because this sign is different from other signs, this produces the meanings. Okay? Now, this space is the space of binary opposition, and we are coming to it next. But let's first see this in concrete terms, what it means. So when I say cat, do I mean rat? No. Do I mean boat? Do I mean bat? No. Do I mean water? No. So when I say cat eats fish, I understand that the animal that meows eats, not watches or drinks. It's not just sitting there watching, or it's not drinking the water. It eats, it is eating fish. Fish which is not a rat or a bat or a cat. So this sentence produces meanings. All right? This is how meanings are produced, through chains of differences. Now, this kind of an explanation you won't find in any book. You won't. Even professors shy away from this kind of simplistic explanation, because it takes away the academic complexity. But I'm trying to make you understand, so I hope you understand this, that meanings are a matter of difference. And so in Arabic, it is said that تُعْرَفُ الْأَشْيَاءُ بِأَضْدَادِهَا. Things are known by their opposition. And this is what binary opposition is. One thing is one thing because it is not the other. Day is day because it is not night. High is high because it is not low. Okay? Big is big because it is not small. Day is day because it is not night. And so these are the penumbras of light that exist between this relationship which produce the meanings through difference and opposition. So this structure of difference and binary opposition is what creates the meanings. Now, this structure of difference can only exist in a commonly shared structure of signification, a commonly shared language, what Ferdinand de Saussure calls the langue or lang. So all of these signs, all of these words, cat, hand, love, ice, water, honey, dog, will only be understandable if you have the same language shared amongst you. So these utterances become parole. This is parole. In fact, I should write it here. Parole. So this is parole, and the lang is the shared structure of signification. The structure of signification, shared and commonly understood, is termed as lang. Right? This is what Dr. Hany Atchan is saying as well. Whereas individual willful acts of speech within the lang are what is termed as parole. Cat eats fish. That is a parole from within the lang of English, for example. Saussure gives the example of chess. Rules of chess as a whole is the lang, it's the language of chess. Whereas a particular game would be dubbed as parole. Notice how you would not be able to play chess with anyone if you don't know the rules of the game, right? If the chess board is laid out in front of you and you have no clue how the knight moves or how the bishop moves or what are the different colored bishops, the light squared bishop, the dark squared bishop, you don't know what pawn is, what is king's pawn's game. You have no clue what is the opening, the middle game, and the end game. You won't be able to play the game of chess, right? This understanding of the structures is called semiotics. Now, I referred to this term before. So, applying semiotics on language is what modern structuralism does. That is what modern structuralism is primarily about. But there could be multiple problems identified within this theoretical framework. For example, the absence-presence binary. Is this a sound way? I mean, we are looking at, is this a sound and correct way of reaching the meanings? Should we apply structuralisms? Should we apply modern structuralism to text? As literary criticism, it is applied all the time. But let's look at some of the problems that it has inherent in it. And so we are really entering into the post-structuralist theory now, the domain, the forte of post-structuralism. One of my professors at the university, Punjab University, used to say that you can't really understand structuralism without post-structuralism. So bear with me for a couple more minutes. And let's understand, we have understood what structuralism is, let's understand what post-structuralism is. So if we're looking at the presence and absence binary, that meaning is produced because certain signs are absent, right? Because when you say cat, the sign rat is absent. It is different from rat. Cat is different from rat. That's what modern structuralism is saying, right? That's what semiotics is saying. That's what Ferdinand de Saussure is saying. It is the difference between rat and cat that produces the meaning in cat. So rat is absent. And so meaning is not immediately present in a sign, since the meaning of a sign is a matter of what the sign is not. Cat is not rat, that's why it's cat. And that is why the meaning is produced in the word, in the lexeme cat. Its meaning, so it's natural, it's logical, it follows logically that the meaning is always then, in some sense, absent from the sign itself. This is a complex philosophical idea, but let's proceed and let's simplify this. Let's understand this simply in very simple terms. When Ferdinand de Saussure says the signifier and the signified are connected in a sign, these are the two sides of the same coin. Is it as simple as that? Is there a direct one-on-one relationship between the signifier and the signified? Which is really to ask, is there really a structure? When we say elephant, for example, what comes to your mind? The animal itself? Let's look at this picture. Let me show this to you in greater detail. For example, look at this. This is the symbol elephant. When I say elephant, for example, aren't there multiple signifieds that come to mind? For example, how about the concept of big, huge, right? It is closely linked with an elephant. An elephant is big. How about the concept of power? Elephants are very powerful. How about the signified ivory? The ivory that's made use of from their teeth. How about the concept of gray, their color? Aren't all of these signifieds a part of the signifier, which is elephant? So when you say elephant, is it just the animal that comes to mind? No. There are other things related to it. That is how metaphors are created in language. That is how language works. So is it as simple as saying 0 and 1 in just binary terms? Elephant, just the elephant animal. Cat, just the cat animal. When you say cat, there are multiple other concepts that come to mind. And these concepts are not just related to each other. They are also in opposition with each other. They are related to each other. They're similar. They're opposite. So there are synonyms and antonyms. When you pick up a dictionary, what do you see? You see, when you look up a definition in there, when you go to a meaning, the meaning of a signifier, there are just more signifiers there, right? There are more signs. One word is explained in more words. So it's not just, it's not as simple as saying, oh, a signifier just has a signified. So, and that's the meaning, and that's it. It's a complex web. It's a complex web. And so there are two concepts which are central to Derridian thought. Jacques Derrida, who's really the father of post-structuralism. His philosophy is called the deconstructionism philosophy, the deconstructionist philosophy. Two terms, two concepts are central to his thought: difference and trace. And basically what he's saying is that this picture that you're looking at, all these meanings in their different relationships to each other, this is the dissemination of meanings. Now this is very complex. This whole business of quest for meaning is very complex. And when you read Derrida's books, for example, when you read Dissemination and he talks about Plato and Plato's pharmacy, that's what his essay is titled as. The concepts are very difficult to understand. But I'm just giving you the basics, the basic understanding of these concepts. So there is basically an endless chain of signifiers leading to other signifiers. If you pick up a dictionary, for example, to look up the meaning of a word, you will find more signifiers to define one signifier. Looking up any of those signifiers will only lead to more signifiers. So it is impossible to establish a one-on-one relationship between a signifier and a signified. Meaning is, thence, a subjective construct. And that is the whole point of post-structuralism. That there is no objective structure. It is all a subjective endeavor, produced through difference. To understand difference, let us first understand trace. Trace is basically these small chunks of related meanings that are inherent within a sign. That is the simplest definition of trace. Trace is not a presence, but is rather the simulacrum of a presence that dislocates, displaces, and refers beyond itself. The trace has properly speaking, no place. For effacement belongs to the very structure of the trace. And so really it's all a game of structures within the structures, and then no structure at all. No objective structure. There are traces of other signifiers in one signifier. Like an elephant I showed you, it can mean power to somebody. I say elephant to you. What does it mean to you? Maybe what comes to your mind is ugliness, the fat, you associated with fattiness. You're an elephant. You're in Urdu, for example, my idiom in Pakistan, kids call other kids hathi, elephant, because they're fat. So ugliness. Whereas the ivory and concepts related to ivory, the concept of beauty, the concept of monuments, the concept of art, these concepts are linked to the ivory, and that's also a trace in the signifier. So there are multiple complexities of meanings which are associated and linked within these signs. So by the virtue of trace, signifiers always simultaneously differ and differ from signified. Difference, thence, is a systematic play of these differences, of the space by which elements are related to each other. This spacing is the simultaneously active and passive production of the intervals, without which the full terms will not signify, would not function. So what is difference? If you understand just this one term by Derrida, you will understand post-structuralism. The difference is this interval, this space that exists between two traces, between two related meanings. The true meaning always exists, and impossibly, quite impossibly, in these spaces. And I'll explain this inshallah, don't worry, but hopefully you are appreciating the complexity of it all, right? Just saying, oh, this is lang, and this is parole, and therefore this is locution, really shows you the caliber and the level of scholarship of the speaker. So I'm giving you the background, I'm bringing the context, and this context is important. And inshallah, I'll build upon it, so just bear with me. So meanings impossibly exist in the space between signs, not within the signs themselves. So meanings are now, in post-structuralism, no longer a part of the sign. The structure has been broken, and hence post-structuralism or deconstruction. Now understand this way. If I say freedom, what does come to your mind? The first thing that comes to your mind. Maybe some of you will think of LGBTQ. They are shouting for freedom, freedom, freedom of expression, freedom of rights. Maybe to somebody, the concept of no chains would make a presence in their mind. Somebody would think in political terms. Somebody would think, oh, nudity is a form of freedom. Somebody would think expression is a form of freedom. And so, for example, if we look at this spectrum on the left, let's say this is the spectrum of a trace. This is the difference, which is produced by the very word freedom, and this is the difference that is produced by the concept of freedom. Let's just bifurcate these two for a minute, just for understanding. So if somebody is thinking about LGBTQ, The direct relationship would be with rights, with human rights. The indirect relationship would be with racism. And so what is connected with rights? Minorities, the concept of minorities. For example, Nelson Mandela would come to mind when we think of racism, or hashtag Black Lives Matter. Then if somebody is thinking about nudity, a nude beach would come to mind. Pornography as a form of expression would come to mind. Women's rights. So-called feminists are saying it's our right if we want to, roam around nude. Okay. And somebody who's thinking about expression, art would come to mind, and blasphemy would come to mind as well, because in today's world, artistic expression is also linked with blasphemy, the blasphemous cartoons, whatnot, right? So all of these concepts are in direct relationship with the word freedom. The concept of freedom is linked with no chains, meaning prison is a form of an opposition, zoo an opposition. Then maybe death comes to mind as freedom. Life is prison. True freedom is death. Or in political terms, a free country is religion freedom. Religion would probably come to mind as an opposition. So you have this spectrum of traces that creates difference. This is difference, this is difference, this is difference. And these spaces as whole are termed as difference. Now here is the thing. Even when you are going to the opposition, you can still find synonymity. This is the beauty of looking at difference, right? So if, for example, there is religion and there is nudity, these are in direct conflict, right? But this would be linked to blasphemy. And blasphemy then would be, in turn be linked to pornography. Pornography in turn be linked to religion. And so if I start making these connections, really, you won't be able to see anything on the page. This is how difference works. This is what Derrida is saying. Derrida is saying it's not as simple as saying, well, cat means cat because it is not rat or it is not bad and so cat is cat. No, that's not how meanings are produced. Meanings are produced through complexities, through difference, through these complex relationships of signifiers and signifieds with each other. So to sum up, modern literary structuralism is basically semiology or semiotics, the systematic study of lexemes or science, right? That is structuralism, studying how meanings are produced through science. That is to say that every text is made up of a number of systems and gains its effects through constant clashes and tensions between these systems, right? Like I explained, the structure of events, the structure of relationships, the structure within the structure of language, the structure of lexemes within each other through morphology and whatnot, so on and so forth. The meanings exist within this structure of systems. Post-structuralism argues that language is not as scientifically structured as the structuralists would like us to believe. That is what post-structuralism is. There is no external to the text. Nothing outside the text exists, and the text itself does not have a perfect structuration. Hence, trying to objectify the meanings in concrete scientific terms is impossible, and it is all subjective. Reference for all of this discussion is the Norton Anthology of Theory and Criticism, 3rd edition. This was the 1st edition. And this is the cover for 3rd edition. If you pick up this book today, it would look like this. I have this one, I have this cover. So if you pick up this book today, it would look like this. Not an Anthology of Theory and Criticism, 3rd edition. Now let me give you some examples to make this crystal clear, to make it even clearer. Let's look at Through the Looking Glass first. And it would be very interesting for you guys to note a couple of things. There is a scene in Through the Looking Glass where Alice means Humpty Dumpty. And they start talking about what does this mean, what does that mean. She even gives him a poem and asks him to tell her the meaning of the poem. And there is something very interesting that Humpty Dumpty says. Okay, let's read these couple of lines. I don't know what you mean by glory, Alice said. Humpty Dumpty smiled contemptuously. Of course you don't, till I tell you. I meant there is a nice knockdown argument for you. But glory does not mean a nice knockdown argument, Alice objected. When I use a word, Humpty Dumpty said in rather a scornful tone, it means just what I choose it to mean, neither more nor less. The question is, said Alice, whether you can make words mean so many different things. So, by the way, on a lighter note, Dr. Hany Atchan shouldn't become a Humpty Dumpty and say things mean whatever I intend for them to mean. But really, on a serious note, on a deeper level, what I wanted to bring to your attention was that then how are the meanings produced? Like Humpty Dumpty says, whatever I say means whatever I intend it to mean. And so what is the context? What is the intention? How do you intend to mean something from something that means something else objectively? How does the subjective inference change the context? Because context then really is this structuration, is the structure for structuralism, obviously. For post-structuralism, there is no context. What is the context? I don't want to dwell too much into this. This is really my subject. This is what I do for a living. I have an advanced degree in literature. I'm currently a PhD candidate in literature and English. So this is my subject. I teach it. I study it. So just wanted to point certain things out for you, which would be of a lot of interest, I'm sure. You can dwell into this on your own. Next, let's look at Sula. Sula is a novel by Toni Morrison. And there is some very peculiar play on certain words in Sula, on certain concepts. First of all, if you read the novel, and I'm just showing it to you from this Wikipedia page, if you read the novel, there are some black folks who are living uphill, on a hill, literally on a hill. But the town is called Bottom. The town which is on the hill is called Bottom. Now in Saussurean terms, tell me, what does that signify? The signifier, bottom, signifies bottom, whereas the town itself is literally physically placed on a hill. Then there is this character in the novel who comes back from World War and is suffering from post-PSTD, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. So this post-traumatic stress disorder that he has is really crippling. And so he sets out to find some kind of meaning in his existence. So what he does is he invents a suicide day, a day which is dedicated to suicide. So anyone who wants to commit suicide should commit suicide on that day. So he carries a banner, goes out rallying. Anyone wants to commit suicide? Anyone wants to commit suicide? Come with me. Today is the suicide day. And it becomes a custom in that town. Suicide related to death, but through this concept of suicide, through this concept of death, self-inflicting death, that character finds meanings in his life. So really, what does the signifier suicide signify here? What is the signified? Is it really that simple? If you want, if you like, you can dwell on it. Let's move on quickly. Next, let's look at a more complex example. This is Hamlet, Shakespeare's Hamlet. And this is the famous Ophelia scene, where Ophelia is sent to Hamlet by her father to seduce Hamlet and to extract information from Hamlet as to what he's planning to do next. So Hamlet, being the cunning, northwest mad genius that he is, he figures out the treachery in Ophelia's mannerism, and so he scolds her, scorns her, and says, "Get thee to a nunnery. Why wouldest thou be a breeder of sinners?" Now, nunnery, the word nunnery, if you're looking at the word nunnery itself, it means a holy place, a building or group of buildings in which nuns live as a religious community, a convent. But really, is this what is meant by the word nunnery here? Nunnery in archaic English meant brothel. And when Hamlet is saying this to Ophelia, what sense would it make to scorn her in this manner, telling her to go to a convent? So what is the meaning of the word nunnery here? What does the signifier signify? A convent? No, get thee to a nunnery. This is the slang of that culture. Why wouldest thou be a breeder of sinners? Now, look at the play of the words. This is not nunnery that I want to bring to your attention here. No. Please pay attention to what follows. Why wouldest thou be a breeder of sinners? Why would you breed sinners? Why would you procreate sinners? So, if we take the word nunnery in its conventional dictionary meanings, which is a convent, then the next sentence means, get thee to a nunnery. And when you go to a nunnery, when you go to a convent, obviously you'll have to take celibacy onto yourself. Celibacy is when you take a vow of not marrying ever. That is the Catholic religion. You cannot become a priest or a nun unless you take that vow that you will never marry. And that is called celibacy, not marrying for religious purposes. So, if you take the word nunnery in the meaning of a convent, the next sentence becomes about the Christian theology. Because in Christian theology, it is believed, obviously, if you read Bible, you'll get to know, and this is in this is an open secret, a common knowledge, that they believe that you are born in nativity, that you are born as a sinner. And all humankind, every single one of us is a sinner. We are born sinners. And it is but Jesus Christ's sacrifice that rids us of that sin. And so he's saying, why wouldst thou be a breeder of sinners? Why would you deliver sinners onto this world? Simply means, why would you marry and procreate? Because every child who is born is a sinner. So if nunnery is taken in the dictionary meanings, oh my God, Shakespeare, man, Shakespeare was a genius. If nunnery is taken in its dictionary meanings, then why wouldst thou be a breeder of sinners simply becomes about marriage. Why would you marry? Why would you procreate, reproduce? Because every child that you will bring onto this world would be a sinner, right? If you take nunnery in its slang meaning, in its stylish slang meaning, in its locutionary meaning, if you like, the way Dr. Hany Atchan puts it, then it means brothel. Get thee to a brothel. Why wouldst thou be a breeder of sinners? Oh my God. Check out how the meanings of this sentence that precedes nunnery changes and yet stay the same depending on the meanings of the word nunnery. Now it becomes about, why wouldst thou be a breeder of sinners? Be a sinner yourself. Because when you are in a brothel, of course nobody is going to marry. Who's going to marry you? Nobody. They'll just spend a night with you, have a one-night stand. Not a one-night stand. A one-night stand is when you're dating someone or beginning to date someone. You would just pay for sex. So nobody would marry you. So you become a sinner yourself and don't breed sinners. It is about marriage in both cases. But in one case, you become a sinner not to breed more sinners. In the other case, you become a nun, the highest form of piety in Christian religion, not to breed sinners. And so really, this is a complex play of meanings and the way meanings are disseminated through the intervals that are produced by trace and difference. And this is very complex business. You can dwell on it, you can read this whole act or this whole play if you like, and dwell on all of these plays on meanings, really. So let's quickly move on. So let's talk about Romeo and Juliet for a minute, because Derrida himself talks about this balcony scene, very famous scene from very famous play, Romeo and Juliet. His essay is called Aphorism Countertime. It is from his book Acts of Literature. I wrote a paper on it. I presented a paper on it in a class. Let's read through a few lines of this scene. It is when Romeo has first seen Juliet in a party, and he follows Juliet to her home. Now they both belong to two families who are in an eternal conflict, so to speak. So he hides behind an orchard, and Juliet emerges from her room and stands on the balcony and utters these words, "O Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo? Deny thy father and refuse thy name, or if thou wilt not, be but sworn my love, and I will no longer be a Capulet. It is but thy name that is my enemy." Because of the family background, right? They are sworn enemies. Their families are sworn enemies. Thou art thyself, though not a Montague, What's Montague? It is not hand nor foot. Montague is the family of Romeo. It is nor hand, nor foot, nor arm, nor face, nor any other part belonging to a man. Or be some other name. What is in a name? That which we call a rose by any other name would smell as sweet. So Romeo would, were he not Romeo called, retain that deeper perfection which he owes without the title. Romeo, doff thy name, and for that name which is no part of thee, take all myself. Now this is very complex. This is extremely complex in nature. What Juliet is saying is that your family name is Capulet, but what is Capulet? What does Capulet refer to? What does Capulet signify? Is there a signified linked to this signifier Capulet? Now this is a very pertinent question for the structuralists. When Ferdinand de Saussure says that in sign there are two sides, and so there is a signifier which is linked to a signified. There is an expression which is linked to an idea. What idea is linked to which idea the family name is linked to? For example, if somebody, my family name is Chima, I am Chima. What does it signify in Saussurean terms? What is the idea of this family name? What is the idea of the family name Capulet? Montague. Capulet is the family of Juliet. I'm not going to go into the depth right now. I'm not delivering a lecture on Romeo and Juliet. I'm not delivering a lecture on Shakespeare. And I'm definitely not delivering a lecture on Derrida. I'm just trying to make you understand. I'm just trying to make you aware of the complexities inherent in the quest for meaning. It's not as simple as saying, oh, because this word has this root, that is why it means this. You get my point? It's not like that at all. So tell me, what does Capulet mean? What does Montague mean? What does Chima mean? What does Atchan mean? Atchan is a family name. What does it mean? It means thirsty, I know, but obviously the Honorable Dr. Hany Atchan is not a thirsty crow. He's not referring to himself as a thirsty crow. Obviously it means something else, yeah? So what does it mean exactly? Is it that simple? Just because this word comes from this root, in dictionary it has this meaning, that is why it means this or it means that? Meanings are produced in context of difference, the dissemination of ideas of meanings. They exist within the space inherent between the traces. I'll come to this in a minute and make another point for you. But so this is Romeo and Juliet for you. Now she's saying to Romeo, if you call Rose by any other name, would that make a difference? No matter which signifier you have, the signified does not change, right? So you can call it a rose, you can call it, in my language, in Urdu, you can call it gulab. In Arabic, you can call it warda or ward, so on and so forth. It would still be the same object. Now compare and contrast this with Crucible. In Crucible, and this is really towards the end, Proctor utters these lines at the end of the play in Act 4. Proctor says, because it is my name, because I cannot have another in my life, because I lie and sign myself to lies, because I am not worth the dust on the feet of them that hang. How may I live without my name? I have given you my soul. Leave me my name. So there in Romeo and Juliet, the idea is what is in a name. In Crucible, this character is assigning utmost importance to the name. That name is everything. So what is the meaning of the name then? Is it like what Juliet says, that really means nothing and the object is the real thing? Or is it like this character is saying, Proctor, that it is everything and nothing else really matters? So I leave you with these ideas. But don't you go anywhere. I have even more interesting examples for you, just 2 remaining. Bear with me. Now this example is from poetry. In poetry, everything turns on its head really. It's a very complex business to really indulge into poetic hermeneutics, if you like. This is a poem called Daddy by Sylvia Plath. And this is really a relatively easier poet to understand. Let's look at the last 2 stanzas. If I have killed one man, I have killed 2. The vampire who said he was you, and drank my blood for a year, 7 years if you want to know. Daddy, you can lie back now. There is a stake in your fat black heart, and the villagers never liked you. They are dancing and stamping on you. They always knew it was you. Daddy, daddy, you bastard. I am through. So, if I have killed one man, I have killed 2. What does that mean? She has killed like really killed? No, obviously she has daddy issues. She's talking about the father and the husband-father, the fatherly figure that she was looking for in Ted Hughes. The vampire who said he was you. What does it mean? Vampire who sucked my blood for a year. Did her husband suck her blood? Really, like literally? No. So what do these signifiers denote to in this stanza? And then in the last stanza, daddy, daddy, you bastard, I'm through. What does it mean? I'll leave you with it, because I want to end this quickly. So last example, but this one should be the most mind-blowing one for you guys. This is a poem by Ted Hughes, Ted Hughes, and this is from his Crow poems, and it's called Crow and Mama. Let's just read through this very quickly. When Crow cried, his mother's ear scorched to a stump. When he laughed, she wept. Blood her breasts, her palms, her brow, all wept blood. He tried a step, then a step, and again a step. Everyone scarred her face forever. When he burst out in rage, she fell back with an awful gash and a fearful cry. When he stopped, she closed on him like a book on a bookmark. He had to get going. He jumped into the car. The tow rope was around her neck. He jumped out. He jumped into the plane, but her body was jammed in the jet. There was a great row. The flight was cancelled. He jumped into the rocket, and its trajectory drilled clean through her heart. He kept on, and it was cozy in the rocket. He could not see much, but he peered out through the portholes at creation, and saw the stars millions of miles away, and saw the future and the universe. Opening, and kept on and slept, and at last crashed on the moon, awoke, and crawled out under his mother's buttocks. Now make sense of this for me, all you structuralists. I'm just kidding. There is definitely a structuralist interpretation of this poem as well. I'm just bringing to your attention how complex it is to look for meanings. How many different theories exist, and how the meanings are understood and produced across structures, across the dissemination, across the difference. Just bringing to your attention. So, okay, let's go back now and let's finish this. This is now nearing the end. Just few more minutes, inshallah. So, coming back to Dr. Hany's understanding of the term locution, the timestamp 18 minutes and 47 seconds. Individual speech is referred to as locution or parole. Now I want you to listen to this for yourselves. Listen and watch for yourselves. Maybe some of you might be thinking, this guy's making it up as he goes. But check this out. This is very important. So stay with me and let's look at this. This is YT93 and I am at 18 around, I'm around this timestamp 1847, 1832. Okay.
Abstract concept is referred to as long.
The language itself as an abstract concept is referred to as long. Which literally means tongue.
Therefore, this is where the confusion came from. So, like to Saussure, he's not talking about the individual speech. That
individual speech is referred to as locution or parole. Wait, let me see. Okay.
Referred to as locution, parole. To Saussure, he's not talking about the individual speech. That individual speech is referred to as locution.
That individual speech is referred to as locution. He will reiterate this again and again. So let's listen for like 1.5 minutes.
Parole. So therefore, there's a difference between what a single specific individual uses as a subset of the whole language. That subset that a single person uses in their regular speech is referred to as parole or locution. Therefore, language is the full concept of every possible way of expressing everything according to that language. And that is almost infinite for the language such as Arabic, because it has literally thousands upon thousands of roots, and each root can be taken in hundreds of different morphemes using
Morphemes, morphology, okay. But I just wanted you to listen to this part where he says that individual speech is referred to as locution or parole. Right. Lang is the shared structure of signification, and parole is the individual speech. Agreed. There is no difference of opinion here. In other words, the abstract and the concrete, right? So Language as the abstract concept, the structure of signification, the whole of the structure is long. And the concrete manifestation of a subset of that shared structure is parole. That subset that a single person uses in their regular speech is referred to as parole, locution. Oh, by the way, while I was making the notes, he refers to Abdullah al-Alayili. And if I remember correctly, now I haven't looked into this, I did not find time to look for his books on the internet for Ayn al-Khata. I recall briefly going through this book, and this book was banned in Lebanon. He was a Lebanese. He studied at Al-Azhar and came back to Lebanon and wrote Ayn al-Khata. And he also wrote Al-Mu'jam, and I remember picking up, it was left unfinished. I think he just completed Alif or something along those lines. And I remember picking up a very torn and worn out edition of this book. I don't know where it was published from. And what this guy is doing is etymological morphology of words. So the two types of morphological study that he does is the inflectional morphology, which is called, I think, Tasrif al-Kabir or Sarf al-Kabir, and derivational morphology, which is Tasrif al-Saghir. So you have fa'ala, fa'ala, fa'alu, fa'alat, fa'alata, fa'alna. This is Sarf Kabir, Tasrif al-Kabir, inflectional morphology. And then you have فَعَلَ يَفْعَلُ فِعْلًا فَهُوَ فَاعِلٌ وَفُعِلَ يُفْعَلُ فِعْلًا فَذَاكَ مَفْعُولٌ. This kind of derivational morphology. And this guy goes on and on, talks about abwab. In Arabic, there are abwab to identify certain morphological attributes. So there is karuma yakrumu. The abwab are made based on the vowelization of the central rukn. In fa, ayn, in fa, ayn and lam, you have an ayn, right? So if the ayn is maftuh in the past and is also maftuh in the verbal form of present and future, which is mudari', then the bab that this verb comes from is karuma yakrumu, is identified as karuma yakrumu. Pay attention that the central word, the central letter, is maftuh, has a dhamma on it in the madi and the mudari, both. So anyways, Ghulam Ahmad Parvez incidentally wrote a very similar thing called Lughatul Quran, in which he goes on and on about abwab and juzur. And so when I was making these notes, I wrote down a fun fact that all of these culprits have been linguists. All of these people were linguists, Al-Aili, I don't think he was a Qur'ani, but he was just doing the morphological study of language. And Ayn al-Khata was really a take on the tradition. That's my understanding of it. So he wasn't really a Qur'ani. I think he identified himself as a Sunni Muslim. But anyways, this was just a fun fact. So coming back to the subject at hand. So when we say language that is different than the limited speech patterns or discourses or parole or locution of single individual. So I'm just reiterating this fact that pay attention, parole is the speech of a single individual, and lang or language is the commonly shared structure of signification. So let us agree to this definition by Dr. Hany himself. Language is another word, locution is another word for parole. I'm sorry, my mistake. Locution is another word for parole. Parole is the individual act of speech. Any individual's willing act of articulation. It has nothing to do with stylized slang. Now, according to this definition, if we look at it this way, when we have established that parole is the act of individual speech, then Quran is the parole of Allah, right? Subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is His speech, His kalam. He has created everything, and so lang is not infinite to Him. He has chosen in whichever subset of the language He has chosen to communicate. The question is, who did He choose to share it with? The whole of humanity, right? At which point in time? So both synchrony and diachrony of this parole becomes important, right? So this I have illustrated through this diagram. This is the diachrony, this is the synchrony. And Al-Quran Al-Kareem, here in its origin, will have to be considered through diachrony and synchrony both. The important point to keep in mind here is that Quran is Allah's parole, right? We don't have a difference of opinion on this, right? Hany Atchan himself is saying this. These are Hany's own words. He says that parole is individual speech. And so the individual existence that we know as Allah, His speech is the Quran. And so, well, let's come back to that in a minute. At around 2246, trickling down to 2328, he makes this comment that the mother tongue is Arabic, right? And there is this massive confusion now, from individual to group, from semiotics to sociolinguistics. Like I told you before, the type of meanings that he assigns to locution are really in the parameters of sociolinguistics. However, he has identified himself, like I have shown you above, that it is the speech of an individual that's called parole, and locution is parole. Individual speech is referred to as locution or parole. But now he's saying parole of a group, parole of a country, parole of a people. Parole is the individual act of speech. Now he's going from individual to group, from semiotics to sociolinguistics. This is what happens when you are an ultra-crepidarian. Parole is an individual act of speech in structuralist linguistics. It has nothing to do with the slang theory. Sure, we are not talking about dialects. The examples Dr. Hany is bringing are all sociolinguistic examples of localized slang or group slang. In fact, the example of two Arabs from two different countries talking to each other also falls into the category of dialects. But let us Iron Man Dr. Hany's argument. Let us Iron Man it. Let's not straw man it. Let's move on. He gives a lot of examples to prove his point. So he's giving the example of family slang. He's giving the example of mango not being known in which part, some part of the world. And so then he gives the example of Musa and Harun alayhim as-salam radiyallahu anhuma. But what is the problem here? Like you said, parole is the individual act of speech. And both of them were individuals, Musa and Harun. Paroles, although parole, I think there is no plural for parole. However, since I'm just trying to convey this to the masses, let's use it in its plural form. Paroles of two people cannot be identical because it is an individual act of speech. Semiotically, even if two people used exact same words, their act of speech would still be individual, not identical. At the timestamp 2630, he gives this example. If I'm talking to my wife or my children, they know certain parts of my parole that no one else does. It is the shared lang that allows for an inside slang, doctor. This is called inside slang. Parole cannot be shared. Parole is not shared. Parole is the individual act of speech. Long is the shared structure of signification. Please understand this. If you're making a case against it, please bring evidence from Saussure. Give us page number, give us reference from course in what is the book? What is this book called by Ferdinand de Saussure? Really a book by his students who collected his lectures. A course in structuralist linguistics or something like that. Give us the page number, right? Then at 2712 he says the main language was Arabic for the Quran. That it is cast into Arabic, it doesn't mean every Arab would understand it. It doesn't mean it has no locution that were brought in, no locutions that were brought in and Arabized from the Abrahamic locution. Also, previously he has said, I never said that locution was not Arabic, right? Okay, let us pause here for a moment. So the main language is Arabic for the Quran. Other locutions, i.e. paroles of other people, were Arabized into this language, right? So to clarify this, Quran is the parole of Allah. Allah quotes the speech of many creatures in the Quran, right? Many people. Musa alayhi salam, Isa alayhi salam, Yahya alayhi salam, Yusuf alayhi salam, Ibrahim alayhi salam, the Anbiya alayhum as-salam. Then he even quotes the speech of Khizr alayhi salam. Even quotes the speech of Jinn. قالوا إنا سمعنا قرآنا عجبا. And then Allah even quotes Shaitan. قال ما منعك ألا تسجد إذا أمرتك قال أنا خير منه خلقتني من نار وخلقته من طين. العراف 12th ayah. So there is satanic locution in the Quran, right? So why not call it satanic locution? What is stopping anyone from calling it satanic locution? Who is speaking? Who is speaking when Allah says, قَالَ مَا مَنَعَكَ أَلَّا تَسْجُدَ إِذَا أَمَرْتُكَ قَالَ أَنَا خَيْرٌ مِّنْهُ خَلَقْتَنِي مِن نَارٍ وَخَلَقْتَهُ مِن طِينٍ. Is this how Shaitan spoke? Is this how jinn speak? I guess you don't even believe in these things, right? Shaitan for you is just a concept and jinn for you is just a concept. But who is speaking here? Who is speaking? Allah or the shaitan? Whose speech is it? Allah's or shaitan's? By your argument, doctor, Quran then does contain satanic verses, right? Astaghfirullah al-azim. When Allah is speaking, it is His parole, His locution. Whatever He is bringing in, it is rendered as His speech. It is Arabized and cast into the divine parole. So that's problem number one. Problem number two, with this line of argumentation, with whatever you have said, is when lexemes, words, the smallest units of a lexicon, when lexemes, generally speaking, are brought into a language, do they remain in their original long, or do they become a part of the long they are brought into? Like English, for example, like we talked about history of English. So kitchen, is it now a French word or an English word? Istiqbal, in my language, in Urdu, we use istiqbal. It is from bab istif'al. It is an Arabic word. But when we use it in Urdu, is it an Arabic word? Does it mean what it means in Arabic? Istaqbala yastaqbilu istiqbalan. فهو مستقبل, right? مستفعل. What does it mean in Arabic? Istiqbal, istaqbala. If he faced something, istaqbala. He faced towards something. Istiqbal in Urdu, it means you welcomed somebody to your house, to your show, to your podcast, wherever. So when words are brought in to another long, they really become the part of that language, a part of that long. So when a parole happens from that shared long, that parole is then from that very language, not outside it, or not from a specialized subgroup slang which exists within this lang that initiates it. Words are all the time, they're becoming part of other languages. Khaki, East India Company, when it invaded India, I use the word India, and they were rulers here for what, 1,000, 2,000 years? My history is not very good. So many words from Hindi, Urdu, especially Hindi, entered into English language. Khaki is not an original English word, but is it not an English word today? Pantaloon. Where do you think pants come from? From patloon. Patloon is the Hindi word for pants. So anyways, no references from your side, but I'm refuting each one of these issues. Problem number 3, burden of proof problem. How is this a proof for etymological and morphological analysis? You're saying, even if I agree for the sake of argument, let's agree for the sake of argument, concordist approach, that there are paroles, locutions from other people in stories of the Quran. Okay, agreeing to it for the concordist approach. But you are applying the semiological framework to the whole text of the Quran. For example, let's go back to my Hur video. Hurum maqsuratun fil khiyam. Whose locution or parole is this? Who is saying Hurum maqsuratun fil khiyam in the Quran? Is this even a part of a story? Surah Ar-Rahman is not a story. Ar-Rahman, Allam al-Quran. Hurum maqsuratun fil khiyam. فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا تُكَذِّبَانِ. Whose parole or locution is this? And this is really a non sequitur. I hope you know this term. What is your proof, evidence to back up your claim that you have to go to a morphological understanding of hur, that it is, if it is from hawara and thence means veiled verses of the Quran? Right? So really, if you're okay, you have made this claim that the Quran contains locutions or paroles of different people. That is to say, you have taken authority away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a sense. You have rendered him dead. He's not Hayy al-Qayyum anymore. He's a dead author of a literary text. But I'll come to that in detail in a minute. But you're saying that the Quran has different locutions in it. And for a minute, let us agree to that. But how is that a dalil? How is that an evidence or an argument for your morphological ways of study? How? These two things are non sequitur. These are not related with each other. I'll tell you what. We'll come to this again in just 1 minute. Problem number 4. How have you acquired the knowledge of how to interpret these locutions or paroles? If these are locutions specific to some tribes before Islam, which resource are you referring to for their meanings, for the meanings inherent within these locutions, the codes? How does it follow from some verses of the Quran being in different locutions or parole, even if we agree, that etymological and morphological structural semiotic analysis is what should be applied to these verses, all other verses? How does it follow from there? And when I say which resource, please don't enter into a circular argument that this is in the Quran. Before proving this, before bringing an answer to this and proving to us that it is indeed so that you have understood the locutions or the paroles, before making us understand that or before proving that, you are using this theory of locutions or parole to prove it, to prove this theory. You're using the very theory to prove the theory. I'm not going to waste any more time with this, really. Let's move on. Problem number 5. This so-called proof that you have put forward from outside of the text of the Quran, from Ferdinand de Saussure, does not correlate with the proofs you then proceed to present from the text of the Quran itself. For before you can prove your claim for a morphological semiotic study of the text of the Quran, you are already applying it on the text and presenting that understanding as proof. And so, what is this called? Petitio principii. Right? Circular argument. For example, case in point, Lisaan Arabi, Hada Lisanun Arabi Mubin. Before proving that semiotic and structural methodological framework is to be applied to the text of the Quran, as it were work of literature or poetry, billah, you are applying it and interpreting it through the very framework and then trying to prove that this framework should be applied to the Quran from interpretations, from applying that framework itself. I mean, ما في مخ, huh? This is really in slang. This is called rigging the game. So the game is rigged. The game is rigged, really. When we ask you for a proof of your theory, you apply that theory on the verses of the Quran and give us the proof after applying the theory before even proving the theory to us. Is that even an argument? So, okay, before going any further, let us pause here for a breather. Let's take a breather and zoom out. And now really, you'd be able to understand why I went into the details of structuralism and post-structuralism. And this note is where I should end today's podcast, really. So, yeah, if it is going to take me around 3.5 hours to comment on half an hour of his video, really, I don't know how many videos I'll have to make. But inshallah, from after today's video, because this was really the central focal point. Once we understand this, once we are past this point, this focal point, inshallah, the rest will be very quick, inshallah. And so let's zoom out and look at it from a macro perspective and apply our understanding of structuralism and post-structuralism to this whole conundrum. It is evident from the discussion above that this modern structuralist approach that Hany Atchan is applying to the text of the Quran. It is this modern structuralist approach that Hany Atchan is applying to the Quran. Unlike many other Quranis who do this, he has come up with a completely unfounded excuse. And so almost every Qurani does this. Every Qurani is applying the modern structuralist, semiological mode of literary criticism, theory of literary criticism on the text of the Quran. But Hany Atchan is unique in the sense that he tries to bring a really unfounded excuse for all of this. That the Quran's parole is not Allah's alone, but contains other locutions. And presence of these locutions within the text warrant an excuse to apply structuralist semiotic methods of analysis onto the text of the Quran. Now you can see how illogical this all becomes. You are entering into lexical semantics. You are applying lexical semantics, which is semiotics, to the text of the Quran. And you are making an excuse for it by saying that because it contains different locutions, that is why we are applying this methodology. It's completely non sequitur. If there are other locutions within the Quranic text, within the parole of Allah Almighty Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, Jalla Jalalahu, then how does that warrant an excuse for applying modern structuralist theories to the text of the Quran? How? Sam Gerrans comes to mind. He doesn't make any such excuses. But anyways, I'll maybe do a video on Sam Gerrans sometime else, some other time. Let me bring to your attention why I spent a large amount of time on structuralism and post-structuralism. Going back to literary structuralism and its three major features: that it is analytic in its approach, analytical, that it displaces the text, and that for modern structuralism, the text is self-contained, right? These are the three features that we studied just some minutes ago. So point number one, analytical in approach. So basically, when you say Allah's parole contains others' locutions, you are taking the ownership from Allah. And that is what modern structuralism does. It takes away that logocentric value. It takes away that value that is assigned from the external to a produce. The value assigned to the text is gone. This now becomes like any other literary text which could be dissected through literary criticism. And by the way, this is what has happened with Bible. In our MPhil, our PhD, Bible is just a work of literature that we study. I've studied Bible. In fact, I've studied most of New Testament and a major part of Old Testament in my MPhil while studying Derek Walcott, because he brings so many references from Old Testament, especially Deuteronomy, Numbers, brings so many references, and he's not working with that theological periphery, theological framework that Milton is working within. He really uses Bible as any other literary text. And now you're making Quran as any other literary text. Point number two, not concerned with the obvious apparent meanings, right? This is a major feature of modern structuralism. And so what does that become then? When you displace a text and you're not concerned with the obvious apparent meanings. Tafsir Batiniya, I delivered a 5 hours lecture, made a 5 hours podcast on this subject. So it was approaching the subject from the classical scholarship. Now I'm approaching it from classical traditional scholarship. Now I'm approaching it from the Western scholarship. So I've shown you from both sides how this is erroneous in its very concept. Quran is not work of art. It's not work of literature. It is not a literary text on which you can apply literary criticism. You know, you will need to tear through to try to reach to the isolated structure of language alone. So you tear through all the apparent meanings, all the apparent structures, and you will just pick out a lexeme and look at it in isolation and its relationship with other lexemes, the juzur. Inshallah, I'll come to that. Inshallah, in the next video, I'll come to that in detail when we look into his quotations from the Quran itself, from the text of the Quran. Point number three, the text is self-contained. Very important. The most important point. For the modern structuralism, the text is always self-contained, right? So now, for Quranists, like a literary text, the Quran is self-contained as well. Nothing outside the text exists. Nothing outside the Quran exists. The author is dead. There is no institution, nor any living, breathing tradition that anchors the text. There is no truth or meaning in the external. Everything we need is within the text itself and its understanding. And this is actually the narrative of Hany Atchan, just to unravel the so-called meanings through study of morphology. That is all that Muslims need, right? The text itself is self-contained. And so our sole purpose as Muslims now becomes just to try and understand the text itself through lexical morphology and semiotics, right? This is what the Quranis are doing. But Quran is not a literary text. وَمَا هُوَ بِقَوْلِ شَاعِرٍ قَلِيلًا مَا تَذَكَّرُونَ. Literary theories are not applicable to the text of the Quran. Allah is not dead. He is Al-Hayy Al-Qayyum. It is a living, breathing tradition. It is not just a mere text in a book, doctor. Come on. Is it like Romeo and Juliet or Hamlet? No, it's a living, breathing tradition. People live their lives according to this. People have internalized it, internalized its values. It has a value outside the so-called structure that you're looking for within the text. When the Quranists tell people that the tradition has corrupted the scripture, they're basically lying, making it sound like the tradition and hadith sit above in authority to the Quran. Reality is hadith and tradition are anchorage. They are the living, breathing tradition, not authority above the Quran. So the Qurani deception is this model. The Quran is beneath hadith and tradition. The reality is these are both the anchors which are in relationship to the Quran. It's not like the Quran or Allah needs anything. It's about having that living, breathing tradition. It's not just a mere text. Allah says in the Quran, and I, unlike you, will not dare to apply literary criticism to the text of the Quran. So in its simple apparent meaning, وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ وَيُعَلِّمُهُمْ الْكِتَابِ وَالْحِكْمَةِ. And we have sent the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam, yuzakkihim, who purifies them, وَيُعَلِّمُهُمْ, and he teaches them the Quran and the hikmah. So it is not a book without a teacher. It's not a book without a living, breathing tradition. Does Allah need anyone? Does Allah's book need anyone, anything else? No. It is for the people to make them understand. It is not existing in isolation because it is not a work of literature. It is not a literary text. So it is not, the question is not about the need for Allah. It is about the need for human beings. Do we need this anchorage? Yes, this anchorage is for us to understand its meaning according to the muallim that Allah sent to us to teach us this book. But really, even if we don't talk about these things, let's not talk about these things. Let's not go into, oh my God, this is like 4 hours long video already, almost. Let's not go into more details and let's stop here. This is really, let's end today's podcast on this note. But really, let us just concentrate on one thing. And that is applying literary theory and criticism, applying these theoretical frameworks on the text of the Quran, deconstructing the Quranic text, or structuralizing the Quranic text, doing a structural study of the Quranic text. Does that even make sense? I mean, let's ask this question in all honesty. Is Quran a work of literature, a work of art? Is it a dead text that you can just pick up and study in isolation? The author is dead. The people of grave, the people who acted upon its teachings are dead. The Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam, ma'adallah min zalik, the muallim of this book has passed away. And so there is no living, breathing tradition. Alhamdulillah, we have living, breathing tradition of this text. It is not just text in isolation. It is not a literary text that anyone, any Tom, Dick, and Harry can pick up and then start applying any theories on its text, doing lexical hermeneutics with it, doing morphological structuralist studies on the text. Oh, Hur is from Hawara, so it means the verses which are veiled. How dare you? How dare you? How dare you imply that this is a qawl of sha'ir, that this is a work of literature? You blasphemer. You have blasphemed against the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam by saying he dare not, astaghfirullah, astaghfirullah azim, by using this word for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You pusillanimous, ultra-crepidarian nincompoop. Really pusillanimous, ultra-crepidarian nincompoop. How dare you? How dare you? You're finished. You're finished. You're finished. Muhammad Hijab, he's a Masri as well, yeah? But really, you are a pusillanimous, ultra-crepidarian nincompoop. How dare you even insinuate that the Quran is a literary text? It is the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It has inspired people. It has changed people's lives. Not nincompoops like you who would sit in isolation, alone, at this old age in a room with a Microsoft 360 annual membership and copy pasting from different sources, applying structuralist theory and criticism to the text of the Quran. How dare you? Really, how dare you? You know, I'm finished with you. Like I told you before, I don't owe you anything. The little bit of respect that I had for you is all gone. After your subs, after your dogs, after your fanboys abused, not just me, and it's not really about myself, but the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, using words which are clearly blasphemous. I owe you no respect. You used blasphemous words for my Prophet. I absolutely have no respect for a person like that. So really, take it as you like, take it with a pinch of salt, you know, whatever. But you're really, you're really a pusillanimous, ultra-crepidarian nincompoop. That's who you are. So don't be Humpty Dumpty, that words mean whatever you want them to mean, and don't apply literary criticism theories on the text of the Quran. It's not a work of art. It's not a work of literature. So inshallah, we'll continue from here, and we will next take up, inshallah, the some of the specific examples from the text of the Quran itself. See how, before proving his points, before bringing clear evidence for his claims, he indulges in a circular argument, trying to prove his theory from the application of his theory itself, from the interpretation that emerges after the application of his theory itself. He tries to prove his theory. What kind of stupidity really is this? I mean, really, I can't find another word for it. So anyways, we'll look at this inshallah whenever next I find time. This was fun, and I really wanted to spend a lot of time on this, and I did spend a lot of time on this. So now you can understand, when I get to do something bi'awnihi ta'ala bihamdihi, it's not a superficial approach. I really do a deep dive into things. So alhamdulillah bi'awnihi ta'ala binasrihi nasrun min Allahi wa fathun qareeb. Really, it's all Allah. It's not my doing at all. It's Allah who gives this tawfiq, and with his ihsan, alhamdulillah, I have made today's podcast. Inshallah, some more parts to come whenever I find time. As I find time, I'll keep making these. Till then, take care of yourselves, and yeah, basically, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.